very good Monday morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to AM Prime or WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's been a rainy weekend indeed across TNT, and the humidity levels, though the rain levels were quite high, the humidity levels, of course, were there as well. So you got that mixture of warm stickiness associated with the saturation from the skies, of course, but much needed indeed for across Trinidad and Tobago. So indeed it was very much welcomed. We hope that such continues, although as we reported to you last week, TNT and the rest of the Caribbean, they're expected to continue to experience drought-like conditions. 2024 expecting to break all records that were smashed last year and be declared the hottest year on record. So we'll continue to bring the updates for you, of course, ladies and gentlemen. But that's what it's like living in a tropical climate. Well, as I say, in the Caribbean, especially with the global warming taking place. But we hope that you're safe. We hope that we're well. Lots took place over the weekend, of course. Some news in respect to kidnapping and shooting in El Dorado of a well-known doubles vendor across TNT. There were reports that indicate that the shooting took place at around 6 o'clock in the morning. But I saw comments on one particular interview hosted by a show host, of course, that the police had not contacted the family up until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had no further information regarding that since then, but question marks surrounding kidnapping for ransom, if that is starting back up in TNT, as well as a focus on extortion as well. All that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to come into the forefront, but we do hope that only good news comes of this, in the sense that she is returned safely to the family. I have not gotten any further reports this morning indicating such, but we really hope that she's returned safely to her family. The Prime Minister returned from his trips from Ghana and India, and he's indicated that Ghana is a good place to look for investments, that he had face-to-face meetings with Ghana's president, and of course they are looking at strengthening relations and business ties. It's the same with India. He was invited by the Ambani family, the wealthiest family that is in India, of course, and one of the wealthiest families in the world, Reliance Industries, for a tour of India. He's indicated that the government is making available, I believe, a 20-acre land, state lands for Reliance Industries to construct a cricket academy. That will be spoken further in due course, but he has indicated that labour will come from Trinidad and Tobago, and all the technical aspects will come from India. Beyond that, he's also commented on the situation regarding the Auditor General and the Minister of Finance. He says he's described the situation as very dangerous. He didn't expect it to get so far, and he says it distresses him every single day. But I'm of the opinion that the Prime Minister, that's as much as we're going to get from the Prime Minister, because the Attorney General is advising the Minister of Finance. Bear that in mind. So I don't think we'll get more from the Prime Minister, at least at this point. He's also spoken about the situation in Tobago in respect to the number of murders, saying that criminals have a freedom of, access to move freely, and therefore they are penetrating Tobago. He says he feels very disappointed, but Tobago is now becoming a part of the general issues that are plaguing the population, and that is, of course, with the criminal element. But what is going to be done about it? Because the Chief Secretary in Tobago has spoken about a T-shaped police. And it'll be very, very, very interesting to hear further what the Chief Secretary is proposing, because what's going to happen in respect to T-shaped police and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Beyond that, in fact, Watson Solomon Duke, the founder, owner, and political leader of the PDP, formerly of which, of course, Foley Augustine and the rest of the TH executive were a part of, have indicated, he suggested a department of Homeland Security in Tobago. Of course, we hope to get Mr. Duke on to speak about that a bit further, but that's more or less the updates that we've gotten from the Prime Minister upon his return from Ghana and India. Lots more to get into. Of course, we'll get into discussions throughout the course of the day here on WESN, and of course throughout the week. But this morning we have some updates to bring to you from the international arena, starting with an update over the helicopter crash that took place in Iran. A convoy of 3 helicopters carrying Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi. Well, state media has confirmed this morning that the president was killed in that helicopter crash. The helicopter reportedly got into difficulties in heavy fog in the north of the country yesterday evening, crashing, killing the president, the foreign minister, and several others. Raisi is a hardline cleric. He was very close to Ayatollah Khamenei. He was heading to the city of Tabriz in northwest of the country after returning from a dam opening ceremony. It was also suggested that Raisi was to also be the next, he was tipped to be the next Ayatollah of Iran, of course, the supreme leader. Because of his death, an election for a new president is now set to take place in the next 50 days. But we have more information coming from this report from the BBC. Let's take a look.
We start with breaking news from Iran, where state media says that President Raisi and the Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdollahian died when their helicopter crashed on Sunday. The wreckage has been located and there are no survivors among those who were on board. The search took place in a mountainous area in northwestern Iran near Tabriz. Mr. Raisi was returning from a visit to Azerbaijan, where he'd been discussing cooperation over dams and water supplies. The helicopter had been one of 3 flying together. This is it taking off to return to Iran. The other 2 reached their destination safely, but the alarm was raised on Sunday when Iran's Interior Minister said the president's aircraft had experienced a hard landing and communication had been lost. Several countries offered to help in the search, which was hampered by bad weather, as you can see from these pictures issued by the Azerbaijan Red Crescent Society. Overnight, Turkey launched a drone to search for the missing helicopter. This map tracks its progress. You can see where it concentrated its search. In the early hours of the morning, Turkey said it had identified a source of heat, which it suspected to be the wreckage of a helicopter carrying Iran's President Raisi. It said it had shared the coordinates with the Iranian teams. Then these pictures emerged a short while ago. These are pictures taken by a drone of the crash scene. You can just see on the laptop screen the wreckage of the helicopter. Well, with me now is Parham Gabadi from BBC Persian. Hi, Parham, good to see you. And this accident, this crash happened last night in Iran, and since then there was speculation about whether or not there would be any survivors, and confirmation in the last couple of hours that the President and Foreign Minister have been killed. What are the authorities in Iran saying?
So the authorities announced that they found, as you said, they first found the wreckage, and they immediately said that there is no sign of life around this wreckage, and they said that they've got only less than 2 kilometers to reach this helicopter, and they were going to make it there within a few hours. But the efforts to find this helicopter took all the night. As you said, it was hampered by the bad weather. First it was foggy. That is believed to be the reason for the crash, and then it turned into rainy weather, and over the night the temperature fell and it started snowing. But Iranian Red Crescent was not able to alone to find the president, so they asked help from the Turkish and the Russians. Apparently the Turkish drones played a really key role in finding the wreckage of the helicopter overnight and trying to detect where it has fallen.
So tell us about who the president was, what his role is in Iran, and what his death will mean for the country.
President Ibrahim Raisi was a totally different president compared to his predecessors because, for example, Rouhani was, they all had their disagreements with the Iranian supreme leader, who's at the helm of the politics in Iran. He holds most of the power. Ibrahim Raisi was considered to be his protege. He was a yes man. He did not had any disagreements with the Iranian president. So, and his presidency is one of the most short-lived presidencies. He did not even make it to the third year. And he started his, he came to power when he was just an 18-year-old in the judiciary system that later on became known as a kind of committee of death, because they issued a lot of death sentences to back in the 80s to many Iranian dissidents. And that's why many human rights organizations, when he came into 2022, when he became a president, many human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, asked for investigations for him about crimes against humanity. So, and then he became the custodian of Imam Reza's shrine in Mashhad. The importance of that is that is where the money and the power is. So he reached the source of money and power at a very young age, and then he became the president a few years ago. But like I said, he was considered to be the protege of Ayatollah Khomeini, a person who listens to him, who obeys the orders, and who does not disagree with the commander-in-chief.
What do you think his death could mean within Iran, given the protests, the increasing number of protests we've seen there over the past few years against the authoritarian regime? Could they have any impact?
That's an important question, because the reactions are divided. Obviously, the Iranian, the supporters of the regime, yes, last night, for example, they went onto the streets of Tehran holding prayers for him. But those are the people who support the regime, and that is the tiny minority. And how do we know that? Because just a week ago, there was an election in Iran, a parliamentary election, and some of the candidates got it to the parliament with only 3% of the votes. That is how unpopular the regime has become. On the other side, we've got people on social media, especially those who've lost their eyes, their limbs, and their family members during the protests just over a year ago. And those people, you see that they're posting, they're celebrating, they're cheering, drinks, clinking drinks, celebrating his death on social media. So these are the two different reactions to his death so far.
The president and the foreign minister killed in this helicopter crash. Given that Iranian proxies are operating all over the Middle East, not least, of course, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and you have made clear that it is the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, who is the key decision maker. But what impact do you think, if any, their deaths could have on the regional conflict?
Minimal, apparently minimal impact, because, like I said, the commander-in-chief is Ayatollah Khomeini. He's the one who even chooses, almost recommends, as they say, the foreign minister. So those are usually the proxies that you mentioned are controlled by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. And that is a totally different branch controlled by Ayatollah Khomeini. And the president has no role in that. And it's important to understand also that the difference between President Raisi and his predecessors was that he almost turned presidency into a ceremonial role. And he did not exert any power, he did not disagree. Even in foreign policy, for example, the ex-president Rouhani had a totally different understanding of foreign policy. He wanted to reconcile with the West, and there was a struggle of power within the Iranian politics. But with Raisi, we did not see any sign of that. So and like you said, the proxies around the region, they're controlled by Revolutionary Guard, so that is not going to be impacted.
So now there will need to be elections, what, within 50 days?
Within 50 days.
Do you expect a continuation then of another candidate to be chosen and inevitably voted in, who is a key ally and supporter and an actual proxy of the Ayatollah?
Definitely, because the signs that we've seen over the past 2-3 years is that Iran has a body that they have to approve all the candidates, and that body has been disapproving, disqualifying all the candidates for the presidency and also for the parliament. So it shows that Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, most of the analysts believe that he's preparing the ground for the transition after his death to the next Supreme Leader. We do not know who that person might be, but we know that he's preparing the ground for that transition. And for that transition to happen smoothly, they need a person who is completely loyal and faithful to the commander-in-chief.
Okay, Parham.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the update, of course, from the BBC in respect to the Iranian president's helicopter crash. Of course, state media confirms that himself, as well as the foreign secretary, were killed in that crash that happened yesterday afternoon. There are tributes coming in from China and Russia, as President Xi and President Putin pay tribute to a true and good friend. We also, the European Union Council President has also expressed condolences, but nothing further at this time, although we are aware that Iran's constitution says that a president will be elected in the next 50 days. The president who was killed in that crash, of course, his funeral will take place tomorrow. Moving forward now, following that international update, so we're getting into some regional updates, and starting with Guyana, as Venezuela continue their build-up of troops on the border between Venezuela and Guyana. Of course, this is over the disputed Essequibo region. We do have an update to share with you at this time. Let's take a look at this report.
And now shifting focus to Latin America, where there's a growing concern of military escalation. Reports backed by satellite imagery show that Venezuela is carrying out a major troop buildup on the border of Guyana. This comes as Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro scales up threats to annex the oil-rich Essequibo region, which has been part of Guyana for centuries. Venezuela's expansion of military operations has been reported in two areas. The first is on the western border of Guyana on an island called Anacoco, and the second is on a small naval station called Punta Barima, just 40 miles away from Guyana's northernmost point. On the Anacoco Island, Venezuela has expanded the airfield and deployed almost a battalion of several hundred soldiers. Venezuela's operational command has ordered increased activity on the island, which is being undertaken by troops and tanks right on the border with Guyana. And to the north, Caracas has expanded the naval station, which at one time only housed just 2 patrol boats. Additionally, Venezuela has deployed several warships in the region that's now within reach of Guyana's Essequibo. The recent troop buildup has become a major concern for Guyana as tensions rise in Georgetown over the Essequibo region's security. Now it's estimated that Essequibo has oil equivalent to 11 billion barrels, making Guyana the world's highest oil producer per capita. However, Guyana has a very small army of only about 5,000 troops compared to Maduro's army of 115,000 troops. Now Guyana remains a key ally of the United States, with some of America's biggest oil firms operating in Essequibo. And amid Venezuela's military buildup, Washington kicked off military drills with Guyana. In fact, over the weekend, 2 F-18 fighter jets of the U.S. Navy flew over Georgetown in a major show of solidarity, a move that has reportedly infuriated Maduro. Now, it may not be in Maduro's best interest to launch a full-scale invasion of Essequibo. However, with elections just 2 months away and Venezuela's opposition being disqualified from contesting, Maduro appears willing to risk it all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more update to bring to you from Guyana in response to the build-up of Venezuelan troops near the border. We're starting to learn more and more as Vice President Dr. Barra Jagdo has told that Guyana has informed the relevant authorities of continued aggression by Venezuela, including the build-up of troops on the shared border, because you would have heard in that report of Anacoco Island. Now, the president reminded the public that that island forms part of the shared border. However, in that same breath, he also indicated that Venezuela forcibly took over the island and acknowledged the buildup of troops there. As such, the relevant authorities are being engaged. Let's take a look at this report from Guyana.
They are building some bridge from Venezuela to their part of Anacoco. Remember, when the award was made, the island was split in two, and we had the eastern part of the island, which they subsequently took over, I don't know, 50 years ago. So if anyone were to just read the history of Ankoko Island, you would see that Venezuela forcibly took over that whole island when they were only entitled to half of it based on the 1899 award, and that took place a long time back. So they were building this bridge to their part of the island, which is, I guess they have a right to do, but we have made it clear, and the relevant bodies have been written to, consistent with the Argyle Agreement and the provisional measures announced by the ICJ. We have notified all of the relevant partners, both of a multilateral and bilateral nature, about the continued attempts by Venezuela to build up a presence at our border in a threatening posture, and that it's inconsistent with what we agreed to, which is that we want to keep this region as a zone of peace. So we're very vigilant. We're very vigilant. We're watching the developments. We've been working with our allies on this matter, and our primary preoccupation is the retention of our territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly as we continue this morning's program.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us this morning. I'm pleased to welcome back to the program the Trinidad and Tobago National Council of Parent Teachers Association. You will know them as the NPTA, of course, but please join me in welcoming the president of the NPT, Mr. Walter Stewart. Good morning, sir, and welcome back to AM Prime. Good to see you.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Shah. I'm happy to be online with you, and of course, happy Monday to all of your viewers as well.
Indeed, thank you very much. And the Public Relations Officer of the NPTA, sadly, she's not with us in studio this morning. That's okay. Ms. Jana Thomas is with us nevertheless. Good morning, Ms. Thomas. Good to see you once more.
Good morning. Good to be on again. Good morning to you, Mr. Shaw, and to all your viewers. Good morning, Mr. President, as well to our division from Tobago, the chairman from Tobago Division. Good morning to you as well.
Of course, Mr. Curtis Williams, the president of the Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, joins us for this conversation this morning. Good morning, Mr. Williams. And Tobago has been very busy, not necessarily in a good way over the last few weeks. So we thank you very much for being able to join us this morning.
Yeah. Morning to all of you all. Morning to your viewers and listeners. And it's a pleasure being here.
Indeed. Mr. Stewart, I hope all has been well with the NPC. I would imagine that they have been busy indeed. Of course, what has been happening in respect to the education sector here, the efforts on the part of the NPTA to bring awareness, a level of understanding as they continue to promote the role of PTAs and the need to establish PTAs or, I suppose, re-energize PTAs that already exist in education institutions across TNT.
Thank you again, Mr. Shah, and a pleasant good morning again. And let me say, a lot has been happening. We are, at this time, looking forward to our mid-year convention to be held this coming Saturday. Of course, the PRO would give you more information on that at the end of this particular program. But we continue to engage all our stakeholders in education, hence the reason we have on our program this morning the president of the Tobago Chamber, Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Curtis Williams, because we consider, of course, corporate Trinidad and Tobago, and in this particular reference, corporate Tobago, as playing an integral role in the education system, not only in Tobago, but of course in Trinidad and Tobago. I wish to segue for a little bit, just of course to mention that we were not on the program last week, Monday, but of course to recognize two very important days that we celebrated internationally last week. On May 15th, we had the International Day of the Family, bringing an awareness as to the importance of family life. Of course, there are many and myriad situations taking place in families, good and bad, but of course we wanted to highlight on the May 15th International Day of the Family the relevance and the importance of family life. And then the day after, May 16th, we had the International Day of the Boy Child. And I cannot stress enough that a lot of emphasis and attention need to be put into our boys in particular. Not that we are neglecting the girls, but of course we need to pay attention to the educational life of our boys, the mental awareness and health of our boys, and of course the violence that some of our boys get involved in from time to time. So a special day was highlighted on May 16th, International Day of the Boy Child. Getting back, of course, to our programming aspect this morning and looking at corporate involvement, corporate engagement in education in particular, I want to take our attention back to February when the Ministry of Education conducted a seminar at the Trinidad Hilton focusing on Adopt a School. When we came into office in November, one of the items on our 16-point plan was looking at corporate engagement and ensuring that corporate stakeholders play a significant and important role in the educational aspect of our schools in Trinidad and Tobago. And earlier this year, we paid a courtesy call on the Tobago Chamber as the first installment of trying to address with our chambers throughout Trinidad and Tobago the role that they can play in education in Trinidad and Tobago. So that was the first installment, and of course, we are yet to go out to the other chambers and the other business people throughout Trinidad in order to get their buy-in and in order to ensure that they are on track with us, to partner with us in ensuring that education is an important pillar in the landscape of corporate Trinidad and Tobago. I tell you why, because I've mentioned this several times before. If corporate Trinidad and Tobago plays a significant and integral role in ensuring that the cohorts that we churn out in our school system from time to time, their bottom line, their profit would be astronomically improved, because they are ensuring that the students who leave our schools year after year are going to be industrious, hardworking, place effort and emphasis and sacrifice in their corporate world to ensure that they reap the harvest, a bountiful harvest of profits in their particular industry. So they have a stake to ensure that the education system is in keeping with the ideals that they would want to inculcate in their particular field of endeavor, of employment, and to ensure that as we yield the students in the work world, in the field of work, that they are going to make a significant contribution in their employment. It's on this role, therefore, that I want to start the conversation with Mr. Curtis Williams, who is, of course, the president of the Tobago Chamber, of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Again to you, sir, good morning, and good to have you on the AM Prime WESN program this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Stewart and your team, and it's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Let me first off ask you, of course, you know the terminology CSR, corporate social responsibility. What role does education play in the CSR strategy of corporate Tobago?
Mr. Stewart, we have realized this situation in Tobago a long time since our first meeting in February. And we grasped that opportunity to jump on board the Tobago division of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. We had no hesitation in coming on board. Some of our members have been actively involved in the schools in Tobago. I can speak to one myself. I have been very, very much involved in the Signal Hill Senior Comprehensive School and also the Speyside High School. And we have been lending support to those institutions through the alumni, and we will continue doing so. What I did urge my other members to get involved, as you indicated, adopt a school and move that process forward. So we're hoping that that will be communicated towards our membership here in Tobago, and we could continue building on that. As you indicated early on, that the product coming out of the school really have an impact on us as business, because it's really, really coming together and forming that good relationship. We could have a really meaningful product coming out from the schools.
That is so important indeed, because I'm sure that you would want to ensure that other qualities as well, honesty, for example, integrity, coming on time to the job, for example, going beyond the call of duty. Such policies, of course, would, of course, enhance the corporate landscape of Tobago and, of course, yield for you and, of course, corporate Tobago all that you need for your organization. You mentioned earlier, Mr. Williams, about your involvement in Signal Hill in particular and Speyside. What specific educational programs would you recommend to impact the community? Because we realize that Speyside in particular belongs to the Speyside and, of course, the east of Tobago community. Are there specific program that you would want to inculcate as well with your involvement in the Speyside High School and even in Signal Hill as well, to ensure that the community benefits significantly as well as a result?
Sure. What we did in Signal Hill, we have, as part of the alumni, we adopt a form, a year form. We adopt a year form, and we continue mentorship towards that form. We also get involved in some of the labs. When we did a tour of the school, and we realized a couple of the labs were not in order. And we, as a group, decided that we would come together and see what sort of equipment we could assist in getting that lab up to scratch. And we want to continue the mentorship, because it's not always given something in terms of monetary or otherwise, but what about your time? So we're looking at the mentorship that we could pass on to these schools, so that we could come to the school on various occasions and speak to them on areas of business, areas of just living, just being a normal person within society, and how you contribute towards society. So that kind of mentorship we wanted to give to, especially at the third formers going all the way up, so that we're preparing them to coming out into the world of work, and the education and the attitude and everything that goes towards coming into the workplace. So that's some of the programs we want to look at, the mentorship programs, and we want to extend that to Speyside High. And not only at graduation, we give them a plaque and we give them all that lovely stuff, but we want to continue with the mentorship towards different year form going out.
Sure. Fantastic. Sounds really good. And as you mentioned, mentorship as well. Sometimes there's need to look at internship, on-the-job training, apprenticeship, etc. I recently had the opportunity to look at a particular institution in Antigua, and they were high on looking at internship and bringing the students in to the world of work, so at least they get their feet wet. They get an introduction into the world of work. Is this something, of course, that the Chamber could be looking at for some of our secondary school students, in particular in Tobago, inviting our students from school into the world of work so that they get a feel of what work life entails?
Mr. Stewart, it seemed like you're reading my agenda. And that was one of the items on our agenda. We were talking about the world of work and inviting either the fifth formers or the sixth formers to come down, whether it's for a 4-week period or so, during the summer vacation, so that they could be exposed to the world of work. And it's something that we will continue having dialogue with the NTPA on this side, and also with the parents and the charges on this side. So it's something that we have on our agenda, and we're really looking forward to it. So we want to drive it through the alumni and go all the way up until it reach to the parents and the teachers alike. So I'm glad that you bring it up, because it's on my agenda. It was my third thing to speak about here this morning. So I'm happy that we're on the same line. We definitely on the same line.
Right. Yeah, we are on the same, and that was stakeholder engagement and involvement is there, being able to be on the same page, almost singing out of the same songbook. So at least we know that it is all in the interest and welfare of our nation's children, and of course, in particular, in the children of Tobago. Let me take you further, though, and of course, I would really want to commend you on trying to involve the NPTA in this particular initiative. And of course, we are ready and waiting and willing, upon your invitation, to be involved with you in this partnership in the world of work and introducing that to students, particularly at the secondary schools. I know that when we met, of course, in February, one of the issues we looked at as well was encouraging our students to be involved in entrepreneurship. As a matter of fact, there's one particular subject at the Cape level which speaks to entrepreneurship, so that our students, instead of being employees, they can now themselves be employers. How do you think we can further promote the entrepreneurship aspect of education in our students so that they, like your good self and of course other corporate entities in Tobago, would become employers in Tobago?
And that's a great topic, and Mrs. Stewart, I must say congrats on that one, because we definitely see the need for such. If we can bring in the sixth formers at an early stage, and we can start to rule out the real aspect of being an entrepreneur, and not what the book will tell you. The book will tell you, great, the theory is excellent, but let's get to the practical. Let's get to the practical stages of being an entrepreneur, even business registration. So we want to get to the stages where you can register your business and know how to register your business and how to live and work with all the regulatory and regulation that goes towards the business. And then we can get into the impacts in terms of the different aspect of business. We're talking about real on the ground, treating with VAT. How do you treat with your VAT payments and how you continue to make contributions to the system via VAT? And then we could go into other areas as marketing, and we could go into the legal aspects of dealing with contracts. And Mr. Stewart, this will be the real thing that the student will be exposed to. And we at the business community, we are more than willing to bring them on board and get them through those processes.
Great, great. I mean, this sounds so encouraging and so enlightening. One of the things we should also look at as well, Mr. Williams, is of course probably organizing a career day, where of course you expose the students as well to the entrepreneurship aspect of the work life in Tobago, so that they can have the lecture and of course the engagement of the similar instances you spoke about, the VAT, of course, registration, etc., and all that they need to put in place in order to ensure that they can have a good, thriving business up and running in quick time. Now, Mr. Williams, I cannot have you on set without looking at, it's not related directly to our topic, but of course it's so topical, and that is the issue of crime in Tobago. 14 murders in 2023, and already we're almost to the end of May, and we are already in double digit 10. From where you sit, of course, this is probably very concerning to you. What could you say to us Trinidadians and Tobagonians, and of course the international diaspora, at this time relevant to crime taking place in Tobago?
Well, Mr. Stewart, our first meeting, we had one of these topics, and we were talking about the school violence, and that was something that we paid a lot of attention to. And to a point where things were a bit settled in that era, we still continue putting some emphasis on the schools and looking to see how best we can work it out within the school system to assist them with school violence. Now we see that school violence move into, we now have the gang culture. It's the gang culture raising its heads in Tobago, and that's what's happening now. It was mentioned by the ACP Hazel about how we're going to treat with the gang culture in Tobago, and that was one of our topics that we mentioned at the meeting with the police commissioner. So I'm looking forward to see Mr. Hazel soon and get his updated plan as how we're going to treat with that gang culture that just of a sudden just sparked all over Tobago. And it's not an easy thing. The business community is very much concerned because it doesn't send a great signal to our visitors alike. And we have been experiencing a very bit of tranquil in Tobago so far, and now we have this thing raising its head. I knew the Chief Secretary had a press conference on Friday where he identified certain things within the community. And this is exactly, again, I'm seeing someone is reading our agenda, Mr. Stewart, because we spoke about the community and how important the community is into treating with all of this. And I saw the Chief Secretary mention a lot to do with the community under the Division of Community Development in Tobago. So I'm just happy to know that someone is really on the same page with the Tobago Division of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. The community plays an important part in crime fighting. If the community have put a blind eye to it, no longer we can't do that. We definitely had to be up and forward. We're talking about the churches, we're talking about all the village councils. They have an important part to play in crime fighting, and not just law enforcement. Law enforcement cannot do it on its own. So the emphasis is on the community, and I'm happy to see the Chief Secretary is really spearheading that drive, and we would give him 100% support in going forward, treating with the community and crime fighting.
And that is so very important indeed. And it's one of the hallmarks of course, raising our society by, of course, making sure that emphasis is placed in the community. The old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. To me, that is still applicable. That is still very important. That is still relevant. One of the issues as well we looked at, just to mention briefly, is, of course, parenting programs in the communities. Because, listen, a lot of what is taking place in our society today is as a result of poor or lack of parenting among our young charges. I mean, if we get it right from the maternal state of the parent up until the child is entering kindergarten, primary school and secondary school, and have to nurture and pay attention to the upbringing of these students, we can certainly build a better society. So parenting is very critical, parenting is very important, and we need to address that. Of course, what you also mentioned, Mr. Williams, is an all-of-society approach, all hands on deck. Crime is everybody's business, and we all need to play a role in ensuring that we mitigate and stem this rising tide that is taking place in Tobago where crime is concerned. I want to thank you wholeheartedly, Mr. Williams, for making the time to be with us. I mean, it was long in coming, but better late than never. We thank you. And of course, we look forward to seeing you at our mid-year convention this coming Saturday. And as we close, I want to turn over this time to our PRO, Mrs. Jana Thomas, who is going to enlighten us on what is taking place in Tobago this coming Saturday, May 25th. Over to you, Mrs. Thomas.
Good morning again, everyone. So PTA is going to Tobago. Nationally, this is our 64th year in operation, and we have not had a mid-year convention since I think about 2016 or 2017. So we're very happy to say that all PTAs nationally from Trinidad and Tobago, we are meeting together at our mid-year convention in Tobago this Saturday. So all PTA members across Trinidad, they have already started packing their bags. They're getting their units together. They're getting our members together. We are going across. There's a lot of benefits in being a part of this convention. There's a meeting of the minds, meeting of persons in PTA. We are joining together to really promote the national benefit of PTA. We're strengthening school communities by all of us just getting together and sharing best policy practices. We're networking with other members, other stakeholders like yourselves, Mr. Curtis, as well as other persons that we would have invited. We have guest speakers. We have the main guest speaker, our keynote speaker, which is the Commissioner of Police, Mrs. Erla Christopher, who will be there giving us our keynote speaking. We have Kurt Allen, our fourth-time Calypso monarch that's going to be there. He is our main guest attraction. We also have local performances from schools that will be there as well. It's happening this Saturday. We are preparing to have a nice, lively event where we can get together, we can share our ideas. It's going to be in Lowlands at the Multicultural Lowlands Center, the facility. It's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or let's say 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Registration starts at 8:30. So all PTA members, if you have not gotten your tickets as yet, get them now. I actually just checked the ferry. There are still tickets available. So if you have registered, come on, let's meet together in Tobago. The National Executive is going to be there. It is also where the National Executive is going to be installed. As you know, we were recently elected last November. There's going to be a host of activities. It's going to be a lively event. We're really looking forward to seeing our units. We're looking forward to seeing our regions and really just coming together and sharing that day together, all focused on PTA and the love of what we're doing for our students and our communities. So that's what's happening. So I hope we see everyone. We've invited the media. It's going to be a really great event. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone in Tobago this Saturday, May 25th.
Well said. Thank you very much, Madam PRO, Mrs. Jana Thomas. And we look forward to seeing all of you at our mid-year convention 2024 at the Hamden Lowlands Multipurpose Facility at 9 o'clock this coming Saturday, May 25th. Our theme, Restore, Rebuild, Rebrand. Thank you very much. Good to have this opportunity to be on this program as usual. Thank you again, Mrs. Thomas. Thank you again, Mr. Curtis Williams. And it's over to you now, Mr. Keaton Shaw. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think I've got to book my ticket for this Saturday for the convention. So thanks very much for that reminder. But indeed, all the very best and looking forward to the media convention on Saturday. Very, very important indeed. And more so thrilled that this event is taking place on the sister Isle of Tobago. So all the very best for Saturday indeed. And we look forward to the reporting to come from that and the updates to be shared with us next week, Monday. Before we go to Mr. Curtis Williams, now he's always made himself available for the show. And he is a busy individual indeed, and I know that we've been working on this for quite some time. So thank you very much, Mr. Williams. But I just wanted to say that it's one thing to give lip service, or as they say, recognize the responsibility of corporate Trinidad and Tobago. It's another thing to actually do something about it. You know, recognizing is one thing, doing something, action is something completely different. So on your efforts, on your part indeed, Mr. Williams, we thank you very much for seeing this as a need, for seeing this as necessary to ensure that there is a brighter future for TNT. And of course, we look forward to your continued support and efforts, and that, of course, of your membership in Tobago. So thank you very much indeed, Mr. Williams, and thank you very much once more to the NPTA for joining us on AM Prime this morning. Lady, Ms. Janet Thomas, and gentlemen, of course, Mr. Walter Stewart and Mr. Williams, do have a great day ahead, a great week ahead, and all the very best for Saturday indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, viewers of AM Prime, we take a break here on the program. We will return shortly as we continue the conversations.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of have a stalemate.
You'll focus on the woman who's being
the victim, or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for being with us this morning. Well, you are aware that the national executive elections of the United National Congress are due to be held on June 15th, with 17 executive posts to be contested. That being said, the post for political leader of the party is not up for contention. That will take place sometime next year. So let's separate that for a moment and focus on the national executive. Of course, well, 5 MPs have spoken out for the need of the national executive elections. They spoke in fear that it would not have been held when it was constitutionally due. Rushton Parry, Anita Hayes, Dr. Rai Ragbir, and others. That being said, though, there is a former United National Congress Member of Parliament, and she's not the only former UNC member to speak out about this, but she has indicated her support for Rushton Parry, and she is deciding whether or not to contest the parties in the party's election. Is she deciding, or has she decided? Because the article was a bit misleading. So let me ask them directly this morning as I welcome to the program former UNC MP Ramolda Ramdial. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to everyone, to your listeners, to your viewers. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. So my first question, you heard this already. Have you decided whether or not you are contesting for a post in the NATEX elections due to be held next month?
I'm still deciding. You know, as it is, these kinds of elections are very fluid, very dynamic, sometimes until the last minute before nomination day. Then decisions are made, be it slate or independent. But I have collected my nomination forms. I'm in the process of getting signatures, and I'll make up my mind very soon.
So the intention is there?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Now, that being said, why do you support, and you've publicly supported, Rushton Parry's decision? What's the reason for your support behind Rushton Parry?
There is need for change, for real change in terms of new leadership for the UNC. I think that the only way that the PNM can be defeated in this general elections, and even back in 2020, also I had the belief that we needed new leadership, but I was of the view and opinion that it was Mrs. Kamala Persaud-Bissess's first term in opposition, and therefore, you know, we should work with her. But since then, I've had my doubts, and post-2020, I've been saying for the past 4 years, I've been writing for the past 4 years, that we need change in leadership for the United National Congress in order to move forward and to defeat the PNM and take government.
If you said since 2020 that you had your doubts, and such doubts you haven't said were concrete, but if you had your doubts, why is it that you chose not to speak of it previously?
Well, when you are in terms of being an MP or a senator, and you are in Parliament, there is this rule, and I think everybody who is in active politics would subscribe to it, collective responsibility. So I did speak out, but I spoke out within that circle inside in terms of some of our political strategies, what we were not doing, what we should have done. So there was conflict, but it was within. I didn't see the need to go public with my suggestions, with my ideas at that point in time, because I had faith in the leadership that they would take good advice, because we all wanted to win. I was wrong.
Now, in that respect, Rushton Parry has spoken out. Is it that your frustrations or your doubts in respect to the leadership of the party align with your thoughts or your doubts that were held in 2020? You know, he's spoken out, he's taken a position quite different to what you took in 2020.
Yes, and I think that's because he had support from other MPs and senators. And I think post-2020, because the education, and I put myself in that role, because of the education and awareness of UNC politics and what has been happening, and more people came out to speak, I think the need and the voice for change became overwhelming, and it would have given him and his fellow MPs that push they needed to come public. So it was more accepted now, and it is more accepted now than it would have been then during my time, because I don't think I would have gotten the support if I had come out publicly to speak. And even being a younger member of parliament from even the other seniors, I don't think I would have gotten that support then. So it was a process. It was a process leading to what you see happening now.
That being said, would your position be the same if you were still an MP under this current United National Congress, opposition?
Definitely, I would have been part of that team with Rushton and the other MPs speaking out publicly and looking to bring about real change within the party, definitely.
But
yes.
if you speak about real change, you're quoted as saying the party needs a mix of experience and youthful new people. Now, there's no doubt that you'll bring experience. But if you also are speaking of a change in leadership, you have contested for a post within the party on 3 occasions, if I'm not mistaken, previously. If that be the case, that you were unsuccessful 3 previous times, you have every democratic right to go for a 4th time. Nothing wrong with that. But speaking about leadership, why do you suppose that you should have a post within the party? Why do you suppose that you would bring about some change to the party?
My past experience, as you rightly said, I served as the elections officer between 2010 to 2015 and the director of the party school between that time also. During that time also, 2010 to 2015, we were in government. We were part of a winning team. And I would have been privy to all of the strategies, the winning strategies that we needed to implement in order to win and take government. So I think I bring a uniqueness where I have served while in government. In the lead up to government, 2009, I was part of the movement for change with Jack Warner and Kamla. I saw how those internal elections were run also. And then when we entered government after a snap election, then I would have been working during that time in government, help implement strategies, winning strategies within the party as an officer of the NATEX, both with youth, working with the young people through the UNC Academy, and as the elections officer in terms of getting the party ready for national elections and even our internal elections that we had.
If you implemented winning strategies previously, why is it on 3 previous occasions you were unsuccessful in internal elections?
That's a great question. We have, and not myself alone, but we have always had issues with the elections in terms of previous internal elections. There were some rules that we did not agree with that we thought gave unfair advantage to the incumbents. I would identify it because it's been in the public domain already and it's been circulating. One such rule that we have not ever agreed with is that with the membership listing. In previous internal elections before, we have had members getting messages on their phones to send out to members asking them to vote for the star team. You know who the star team is. They have always been part of the incumbent team. And other candidates who have challenged the star team and the incumbents have never been privy to that information, the membership listing. So then there again, you have that unfair advantage via the election process that they have taken advantage of as incumbents to engage and communicate with the membership, whilst challengers have not had that privilege. Another issue is that of card-holding members are not allowed to vote automatically unless your name is on that current listing for the elections. In the past, that has never been a rule. It is just that you walk with your ID on the day of the elections, you show your membership card or your party card, you show your ID to confirm that you are the person on the card, and then you are allowed to vote. So by putting in that new rule, you have had a significant portion of the membership not being able to vote.
So
I would allude to an engineering in the favor of the incumbents.
That being said, do those concerns remain for the elections, which are about 3 weeks away?
So far, I have seen that issue that I just mentioned with the membership card holders not being allowed to vote automatically. I've seen that in the election rules, and I intend to write the chairman of the election committee on it. I know others have other issues and grievances, and then we are now going into that process before the elections where we'll be privy to the membership listing after nominations.
That being said,
so there's some issues.
No, I'm curious to know, and I'm making sense of all that you're saying. If that is the case, if that remains in place and not necessarily dealt with, as you've pointed out, does that suggest that already you may have an unsuccessful campaign if it is you choose to run?
I wouldn't say unsuccessful, because the power of the people surpasses all. I think what has happened now at this point in time, and which I will also allude to, was the reason why Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar did not pull up her elections together with this NATEX, is that the voice for change and the call for change is overwhelming. So even persons who would traditionally support the star team without question, they are now also calling for change. So I think there's a possibility of that MP Rushton and challengers to the incumbent can win the entire slate and win the entire this NATEX elections.
So, to clarify things so that there is an understanding, is it that there...
But just to interrupt you a little bit, but it does not stop the legal team of candidates and others, asking about these issues and irregularities and getting an answer and trying to change the rules before we go into the election. It doesn't prevent that.
Was there a falling out between Mrs. Kamla Prasad-Bissessar and yourself? Did Kamla Prasad-Bissessar lose favor with you, or did you lose favor with Kamla Prasad-Bissessar?
There was no conflict, no face-to-face conflict, but Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar knew that I was disenchanted and I didn't agree with many of her political strategies moving forward into the 2020 general election. There was no conflict, there was no bad blood. We were quite on speaking terms up until screening, and then when I was not chosen, well, I just went about my business. So there was no conflict, there was no falling out, as people would say. But she knew that I was not in support of her approach to the 2020 general elections, and I'll give you some examples. Other MPs like Ganga Singh, Fuad Khan, myself, Fazal Bo, everybody spoke to her about uniting the party at that point in time. We spoke about bringing in back Mr. Bastio Pandey, including his daughter Michaela into the mix moving forward. Just as a side note, you would have seen that Dr. Keith Rowley, in the lead up to 2020, brought back in Brian Manning and the Manning faction. So, we were like, well, we needed to unite the United National Congress moving forward. So that was one suggestion I had given her, together with my other fellow MPs, that wasn't taken into consideration. And then there was also other stuff dealing with parliamentary procedures and how we operate in the parliament. For example, this motion of no confidence that the opposition has every right to bring against the government and other ministers. We are allowed that during our private members' day, which is once every month. There was an absence for that entire duration as my term as MP. No motion of confidence came in the parliament against the government and the prime minister. And it continues. So it would be 10 years, history making, that this current opposition has not filed a motion of no confidence in the prime minister and his government. And yet still you want to go out there and influence persons that we need a new government, but you're not using your parliamentary tools to solidify and to push your agenda of wanting a new government.
But that also speaks to Kamla Prasad-Bissessar's leadership. Do you think
Definitely.
Do you think that Kamla Prasad-Bissessar is the right individual to lead the United National Congress in the 2025 general elections? Do you think that she's the right person to lead the United National Congress as a whole?
Definitely not. I have been calling for this change since 2020. I've been writing columns regularly, talking about national issues, talking about leadership. I think both Keith Christopher Rowley and Kamala Prasad-Bissessar needs to retire. They need to give their party new leadership. They need to deal with succession planning and allow for new leadership.
So, but therefore, Mr. Ramdal, you've just essentially made an argument that the national executive elections don't necessarily lead to a difference, lead to a change. You're just changing the executive membership where the political leader remains the same.
No, not really, because there are mechanisms under the constitution of the UNC where, the political leadership election is due next year, 2025. And if the NATEX takes a decision to have that elections earlier, they can trigger an election for political leadership earlier.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, though.
Well, that is why we need to rally around the challengers to the incumbents and give them that support.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to your position within the party, and you have spoken, as I said, publicly in support of Rushton Parry. Previously, you've spoken in support, in fact, you contested a position under Vasant Bharat.
Yes.
That being said, would you support anyone who opposes the current party's executive? Would you support anyone who opposes the leadership and the current leadership style within the United National Congress?
I am all for change and new leadership of the UNC. So if you look at it from that perspective, I would say yes. I will support the challengers to the incumbents because I don't think they can take us into government. I think that we need new leadership across the board to pull the UNC together, to unite the party, to work with other opposing forces in a very workable, constructive way so that we can defeat the PNM.
So currently, as it stands, you do not think that the United National Congress can win the next election?
Definitely not.
Are you willing in any way to work with the United National Congress and the current national executive? By extension, are you willing to work with Kamala Prasad-Bissessar to actually, if things do not change, if things should not change?
In 2020, when I contested with Vasant Bharat on that slate, after the elections, him, myself, and others, we sent out public letters, emails, we sent it out directly to Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, giving and showing our willingness to work with the party in order to make the party stronger for national elections. And that was completely rejected. So we may want to work, but they have already decided that they don't want us in.
Mm-hmm. If that decision is being decided, last year the opposition leader did call for unity, for call to others to work with the party in the local government elections. He didn't seem to be in favor of that call.
That call was a fake call, because how? You make a call on a public platform, but how do you engage these individuals? How do we go about helping the party? Do we just walk into a constituency office? Do we just call on MPs? I remember for the local government elections in 2020, right after 2020 general election, there was a local government elections in Chaguanas East and another area. And I took the proactive step to go to that MP's office and drop off water and stationaries and show that I was ready to assist. And that MP sent it back to me home, dropped it off saying not accepted. So it is the incumbents at this point in time has no intention of winning any national election. They love opposition, and anybody with any sort of experience who wants to help the party, who they don't like or don't agree with or think they may be threatened by them, they have not engaged or accommodated them. And this is why I tell you my personal experience. So, I don't think that they want to win a general election.
So is it that, again, getting to the point that you just made, in your opinion, are you suggesting that the current national executive is misleading or misadvising the political leader? Do you think it's the national executive that is the issue, not necessarily Kamala Prasad-Bissessar?
I would say it's all of them. It's all of them, because as a leader, you must know Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar has nearly 40 years experience in politics. She knows how to win an election. So she would know that whatever advice is coming to her, whoever is whispering in her ear.
I'm sorry to interject you. Sorry, you just said that Kamla Prasad-Bisesa knows how to win an election.
Definitely, she just doesn't want to win.
And why do you think she doesn't want to win?
For many reasons. Probably because she thinks her team is really weak, and what it does is just probably maintain her status quo of being leader with the loyalists, and that's about it. Because, I mean, honestly, tell me, what do you think that the opposition has shown any sort of indication via its work as an opposition to move forward to win and defeat the PNM? I mean, if you ask any reasonable member on the ground about what do you think about the opposition, they will tell you what they're doing, why they're so quiet, why they're not, you know, protesting against the government, why aren't they dealing with these national issues, representing people. So I think that within that leadership, the incumbency, it's an intention not to win an election. It's just that they're happy in opposition.
So you also... It
takes a lot of work. In other words, it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of political strategy, a lot of resources needs to be expended in order to win a general election. As I said before, I came in on a winning team, sleepless nights, lots of work. You have to mobilize an entire country. You have to have a platform of national unity. And I make reference to the Faizabad Accord in 2010 that was signed. I was the youth member on that stage. And I can tell you, you need national unity to win a national election. And at this point in time, we have seen over the past 10 years that this incumbent NATEX and leadership, they've been unable to achieve national unity.
Laziness, incompetence, or a lack of willingness. I mean, you haven't used those words directly, but you have described it to that extent. So, moving forward now into 2025, do you think on the part of Rushton Parry and his colleagues, him speaking out in reflecting on the issues within the party, they have argued that internally they've tried to deal with this. Now they feel as though there was no choice but to speak out publicly. Do you think that further dampened any chances on the part of the United National Congress? Do you think that further derailed the United National Congress for any chance in 2025?
Definitely not. I think what would happen is that you would have a reinvigoration, a rejuvenation of the party and of the wider national public. Because let me give you another example. In January of 2010, with the movement for change for Jack and Kamla and other persons like myself, we were able to win the internal elections. A snap election was triggered by Mr. Manning 5 months after. So literally, we had 5 months to get ready for a general election under new leadership. And with the countless hours and tireless work and talking to everybody on the ground, every party, labor union, everybody, we were able to achieve national unity in less than 5 months not even 5 months, because Mr. Manning would have called the election in April, and then but there was a lead up to it, so there was a process. But the new leadership triggered a reinvigoration in Trinidad and Tobago. Persons came on board with new leadership with Mrs. Prasad-Bisesa. And in less than 2 months, we were able to form the People's Partnership, going to a snap general election and win 29 seats. So I don't... go ahead.
Throughout this interview, what I've gathered is that you've spoken a lot about the people surrounding Kamla Prasad-Bisesa. You've spoken about the executives of the party and not necessarily Kamla Prasad-Bisesa. It seems as though you had your doubts since 2010. Do you regret supporting Kamla Prasad-Bisesa?
No, I didn't. No, don't get me wrong at all. I don't ever regret supporting Kamla Prasad-Bisesa. As a very young person then, we saw that Mr. Basdio Pandey could not have won another general election, just as we see it now with Mrs. Prasad-Bisesa. And we decided, as much as we loved Mr. Pandey and we respected all that he did, we saw the need for change of leadership. And in every political party, there is always a time where you would need change and new leadership to move that party forward. So my choices in 2009, 2010 were all my choices, and I never regretted making those choices. But 14 years later, under the same leadership, there is need for change.
Now, as we're coming to the end of this interview, with all that has been said, you've indicated that you have your nomination papers, you are gathering signatures. You know, I think I already know the answer. The answer may be obvious, but in terms of support that you're getting, in terms of signatures, does Ramona Ramdial have a backing, have a support, should she intend to run in the next election?
Definitely. My signatures are all ready to go. And I have gathered even additional support over the past few years in terms of my writings, columns. People love what I have to say because I don't mix my words, and I let you know exactly what is happening politically and my opinion and how I see it. And people appreciate that freshness in terms of politics and how we talk about it publicly and how we advocate for change and for development of Trinidad and Tobago. So I have a lot of support. I mean, you would get the loyalists, the incumbents saying, well, you know, she's a sour grape and this and that, and the macaram. But they're saying it about Rushton and others also. But that's all par of the course in terms of in politics. I mean, they said it about Mrs. Prasad Bisessa 14 years ago when she was challenging Mr. Pandey. They said it about Jack Warner. So we know how to deal with that. But yes, I have support, I have backing. I was the Member of Parliament for Couva North for 10 years. So my former constituents, party members, everybody, you know, they will show support, and they have shown support in the past.
So why your indecision?
There's no indecision as such. More than likely, if I'm running, it would be for either the positions of elections officer, which I previously held in the NATEX. There's also the education officer, which, of course, as the director of the UNC Academy, you know, I have that experience. And so we would move forward from there. The positions of DPL and chairman and so on, I think that would better be left for these current MPs and the incumbent MPs who have taken a stance. And I have no problem serving in any capacity within the NATEX. My ego is not so huge that I think I should always run for the highest position. But I think just being a member of a slate, being a member of the team, I can bring a lot of positive change and development to the UNC.
Well, Mr. Ramdial, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. You said at the beginning, you said decisions could be made the day before your nomination papers.
Not even the day before, minutes before nomination ends on the 25th. Persons will be, you know, for those running as slate, they'll be juggling positions, they'll be switching persons. And even for independents, you know, minutes before nomination, you can change that position. But just have the rest of your form in order.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the program, and all the very best to you should you concretely decide that you are running in the NATEX elections.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. All the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, once more we thank Mr. Ramona Ramdial, former Member of Parliament for Couva North under the United National Congress from 2010 to 2020, for joining us on the program this morning. We will be in contact with other UNC members to discuss more about the internals. At this point, I've said it on this platform, I've said it on previous platforms, in my opinion, this only to a great extent probably strengthens the People's National Movement's image. And my reasoning, and you may disagree with me, is because quite possibly there is that need for a shift within the United National Congress, but publicly bringing this to the forefront, kind of when you're washing your dirty laundry in public, as they say, there is a split in the People's National Movement, but their public image has always remained quite strong, which does help the party. That being said, anything could happen. This is TNC, anything could happen. Mr. Ramdial did note that in 2010, there was just months, mere months before the general elections, the snap elections were called, that they had a new national executive when Kamla Prasad Bisessa was voted as political leader. But ladies and gentlemen, that's it for AM Prime. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, and thank you very much to my guests for their presence on the program. I'd like to also thank my dream team, of course, Ryan Gomez-Burke and Milewood, for always ensuring that AM Prime goes live. Thank you to the viewer. Indeed, do have a great day ahead, a productive one. I'm Keaton Shaw saying, save sweet TNT. I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of have to stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful. The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement. If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not
game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we're different criminals and we manipulated the law and we're exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Momentum of the very troubled international relation. Some people think that Beijing could take the opportunity now. What do you think?
The first thing, actually, Taiwan produced more than 92% of the most sophisticated semiconductor. And now I think everyone will agree that we are talking a lot about AI, artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence needs the most sophisticated semiconductor. Concerning this part of production, it is 100%, I repeat, 100% made in Taiwan. So it's just the consequence that China attack Taiwan, it will be terrible. Of course, in Taiwan, we will suffer, but I think as well as in France, in the world. So talking about if China attack Taiwan, what will be the reaction of France, of US, of Japan? I think it's just too late. It's finished in Taiwan, but as well as, the modern life we are living today in France, for our mobile, for the electric car, for the computer, for Airbus, for everything, we need everything need a computer, need a semiconductor. So I think the best way is just to work with Taiwan and to defend our, your interest, the world interest, and it is the most important thing. If we just every time suppose that what will be the reaction of the world if China attack Taiwan, I just say it is too late. So the best thing really is to work together to make a very efficient prevention.
Francois, you're a diplomat. You've been representing Taiwan and France for some 7 years. Is there still room for diplomacy in relations? Just today, Weibo, which is China's equivalent of X, blocked any hashtags with the name of the new Taiwanese president. Can diplomacy still play a role?
I am the ambassador of Taiwan in France. Of course, France don't recognize my title of ambassador. For the past 6 years, I believe I really changed a lot of relation between Taiwan and France. And I think I give also a lot of good advice for the French government, French society, how to deal with China. So it is the room of diplomacy. So the diplomacy still work. Another thing is, formal relation will not save your country. I've taken the example of Ukraine. Of course, we still continue to support Ukraine very strongly. It is the position of my country as well as my people. But the safety of Ukraine was guaranteed by US, by UK, by Russia in year 90 when they abandoned their nuclear weapon. And in 21st century, their security was also guaranteed by China because they joined the Chinese politics, but they still have war. Taiwan is not recognized by the world for more than 50 years, even 60 years. But for the past 60 years, we are so successful to maintain peace and the security, and we even develop our own democracy and liberty. And we also have now the capability to produce the best semiconductor of the world. So I think diplomacy is just part of the survival or the prosperity of a country. And diplomacy do have a room to work. So I think we just cannot only emphasize diplomacy. It do work for the region. I'm just talking about with France, but they still have a lot of we call no official diplomacy, and it's still diplomacy.
Cyril, one
Talking
question
about
to finish.
diplomacy quickly, President Xi Jinping of China was in Paris less than 2 weeks ago, and there was no mention. I was there in 2019. Taiwan was on the table in the conversation between French President Macron and Xi Jinping. This time, not a single word about Ukraine, about Taiwan. Is it good news for you or bad news?
Okay, I think we should look at the context for the relation between France and China. You know, this time is the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic relation between France and China. 60 for China is very important according to a lunar calendar. 60 is like a century. So normally we should have a lot of things concern the China interest. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even in 1994. In 1994 is the first time that France and Taiwan have this kind of a common communique, and France recognized Taiwan as part of China. So we should expect something about Taiwan that was pronounced this time, but nothing about Taiwan. So I think if we look at this way, the importance of your relation with China, I think I would say it is a good thing. But another thing, I will come back to, we are talking about the diplomacy. I think Monsieur Macron do say something about Taiwan to Monsieur Xi Jinping, and do say France have certain interests to defend in the region. So diplomacy is not only formal diplomacy, but also under-table diplomacy. And so I think diplomacy continues to work, and in general, I think I'm quite satisfied for this meeting between France and China. But if we talk from the European point of view, you should pay attention to the will of China to divide the European Union. I'm also for the European Union. If we look at this dimension, I think it is not a good thing.
We will.
François, we thank you so much for coming on the set.
Thank you.
Thank you as well for coming on the set. Thanks to both of you. Next now to South Africa, where the top court there has ruled that the former president, Jacob Zuma, is not allowed to stand as a candidate for parliament in the upcoming general election. The court sidelining Zuma, saying a previous criminal conviction prevents him from running for MP. 82-year-old Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison in 2021 for refusing to testify at a judicial inquiry into government corruption. That decision looks likely to increase political tensions ahead of the pivotal vote there next week. And up to 200 police officers from Kenya are set to deploy to Haiti within the next few days. That's part of a force of 1,000 officers meant to lead a UN-backed multinational mission aimed at tackling gang violence. Haiti has suffered from poverty, political instability, and natural disasters for decades, and the multinational force has been tasked with helping the country's beleaguered police rein in those criminal gangs. But the mission has faced legal challenges, with Kenya's opposition saying a court order prohibits the deployment as unconstitutional and illegal. Bastien Ranuya told us more from Nairobi.
Speaking to the media, Kenya's Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary said, "I can tell you for sure that the deployment will happen in the next few weeks." He's speaking about weeks, but according to Kenyan and Asian security sources, this deployment could be organized next week to match Kenya's president's visit to the United States. According to these sources, at least 200 men could be sent to Haiti, first to protect the airport and then other key institutions in Port-au-Prince. And I can tell you that here in Kenya, many do not understand why Kenyan policemen should be sent in Haiti. First, there is a question of their safety. They do not understand why Kenyan policemen should be deployed there, given that gang members are heavily armed. They are worried about their security. And then there is a question of the legality of this deployment. A politician who's also a lawyer, Ekuru Aukot, decided to challenge this decision to the court. He is wondering what is the legal basis behind this deployment. There is no government in Haiti, so according to him, it's impossible to legally authorize this deployment. But there is one thing for sure. According to the Ghanaian government, it's urgent to act as fast as possible, especially for the civilians in Haiti. According to the United Nations, the first quarter of 2024 has been the most violent ever in Haiti. At least 2,500 civilians have been killed or injured by gang violence.
Well, that comes as the president of the Dominican Republic easily won another four-year term in office. Ruben Abinader won Sunday's vote in an endorsement of his handling of the economy and tough policies toward migration from Haiti. Now, the two nations share the same Caribbean island, but the much more prosperous Dominican Republic stands in stark contrast to its poverty and gang violence-plagued neighbor. French President Emmanuel Macron has called a new crisis meeting for this Monday to discuss the deadly unrest in the Pacific territory of New Caledonia. This is the third such meeting in less than a week, the previous two having resulted first in the decision to declare a state of emergency in the French territory, and then to send reinforcements to help government forces on the ground restore order. 1,000 French police officers are now in New Caledonia. The streets are relatively calm, but roads are still blocked by protesters, and the airport remains shut, stranding tourists after a week of riots. The violence started when French authorities sought to pass a bill that would diminish the political weight of the indigenous population, as Shirley Sitbon explains.
This is what RT1, the road crossing the main island of New Caledonia, looked like on Sunday. After 6 days of violence, with barricades blocking traffic, including to the international airport, French police and military forces removed the rioters. Hundreds of officers were flown over from metropolitan France. French authorities say they have restored Republican order, releasing images of trucks removing charred cars and various objects from the road, and of police officers patrolling Nouméa, the capital. The archipelago's residents have long been divided on whether New Caledonia should remain part of France, be more autonomous, or fully independent. Those backing independence are mostly part of the indigenous communities, which represent only 39% of the overall population. What sparked the latest violence was the French authorities' plan to impose new voting rules, which would grant voting rights to thousands of new non-indigenous residents. This would automatically diminish the weight of the indigenous community and ruin its hopes to get independence through a democratic vote. On Sunday, as roads and barricades were cleared, people rushed to stores to get groceries after days of being holed up in their neighborhoods.
India's massive 6-week-long election enters its final stages today. Today marks the 5th out of 7 stages in the election that could see some 970 million people turn out to vote. Every year, millions across India are forced to leave their homes in search of work, heading toward metropolitan cities that are far from their home states. There are almost 600 million migrants in the country, and the figure has risen to 150 million in 2023. This mass migration deprives many citizens of their fundamental right to vote, jeopardizing the country's democratic inclusiveness. Here's our special report.
In New Delhi, these men sort electronic waste from the garbage. They work nearly 12 hours a day for a mere salary of 110 euros per month. With the lack of employment opportunity in their home states, these workers have migrated to the national capital from across India. Muhammad Alam is still registered to vote in Bihar, a state nearly 1,400 kilometers away from Delhi. But this year, he won't be able to return to his village to vote, and proxy voting system does not exist in India.
We can't leave our jobs. Voting should be online so that people like us, who are in Delhi or Chennai, could vote remotely.
Too expensive, too far. Savan and Vibha will not be able to go back to Bihar and Uttar Pradesh.
I'll have to spend 100 euros for the trip. If I leave, the work here will stop. How will I feed my children?
According to government figures, India has nearly 150 million daily migrant workers. As a result, the Election Commission of India reaches out to the families of migrant workers, convincing them to return home during elections, particularly in certain states like Jharkhand, one of the poorest in the country.
We have identified 930 people who are currently outside the district. We're adopting different means to call them or visiting their homes in the village.
Rajesh Rao works in the western Indian state of Rajasthan, which is nearly 1,500 kilometers away from his registered polling station.
I travelled 3 days. I came to vote to choose the right politicians who will ensure a good future.
Despite their large numbers, migrant workers remain invisible in the country's politics, says Mukta Nayak, a researcher on migrant issues.
It's very difficult for internal migrants to become political subjects because their identity as workers, their identity as belonging to a certain caste will always come before their identity of being a migrant.
It's not only the internal migrants who are mostly excluded from the voting process. Over 17 million Indians living abroad also miss the opportunity.
This is France 24. Stay with us. There will be more to come for you at the top of the hour.
He has a very beautiful smile. He's very cool and sweet.
Look, she's so cute. They are young and charming. Their job, that of an escort. Today, many Japanese men and women choose love on demand, without strings, with solo relationships, which can be non-sexual or even virtual.
Sometimes I say things to Miku, but other times it's just fun to be together and have tea. She's so cute.
My boyfriend is like family, but my virtual friends are my real romantic partners.
This week in Reporters, dive into the world of Japan's new dating rules. Watch Japan Love 2.0 on France 24 and France24.com.
The World Today with Stuart Norval. Debates and in-depth discussions surrounding events across the globe.
The World Today from Monday to Thursday here on France 24.
Hello, everyone. This is Paris Direct. I'm Jeannie Godula. The headlines. The International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders, including the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That is in connection with their actions during the 7-month war. We'll be getting reaction from Iris Mackler live in Jerusalem on the way. Iran's hardline president Ibrahim Raisi killed in a helicopter crash along with his foreign minister. That accident in the mountains of northwestern Iran now leaving the country without two of its most influential figures at a time of both heightened foreign tension and domestic discontent. And a huge boost for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in his battle to avoid extradition to the United States. London's High Court ruling U.S. assurances over his case were unsatisfactory, and he would get a full appeal hearing. The latest with Benedict Pavio in London on the way. Also coming up for you, you'll get our daily dose from the Cannes Film Festival. Demi Moore is making her debut in Cannes' official selection as the co-star of the in-competition film The Substance. The details with Eve Jackson on the way. We're going to start first with this latest from the International Criminal Court, and the chief prosecutor there has asked for arrest warrants, first of all against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for alleged war crimes. Another warrant was issued against the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The ICC prosecutor also asking for arrest warrants for 3 Hamas leaders for their alleged roles in the October 7th attacks in Israel.
On the basis of evidence collected and examined and analyzed by my office, I have reasonable grounds to believe that 3 senior leaders of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Daif, and Ismail Haniyeh, bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of Israel and the State of Palestine from at least the 7th of October 2023.
Well, we're going to get more reaction now from Iris Mackler, who is live in Jerusalem for us. Iris, we just heard what Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor, had to say about the Hamas leaders. What did he have to say about Israeli leaders?
He said that he was also going to seek arrest warrants against the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister for crimes including using starvation as a weapon.
WESN.
There are many hard questions we have to ask ourselves at this point in time in our nation's history. But the most important one of all, is God still a Trinity? I ask because it's hard to fathom that God is with us, answering our prayers, and the situation that we're in is one that seems to be a quagmire of our own making. Or maybe it's something to do with the old saying, God helps those who help themselves, and then we have to ask, are we helping ourselves? Although perhaps my first question is a little unfair, because when I look around the world, for the most part, there are so many issues around the world, almost as if the progress that we've made coming out of World War II and then into the Cold War, and then the peace dividends and the prosperity post-Cold War, it's almost like if a significant amount of that has been wiped away by a combination of COVID, mismanagement, and situations and systems becoming so complex that managing them, running them, and properly updating them have become Herculean tasks. And this is around the globe, not just here. Not just here with a country that is trying to make do with some laws so antiquated they might be from our colonial days. How many important laws have we retained from our savings clause? Fact of the matter is, I have said before, media literacy might become the new benchmark that literacy was. It's not enough now to be able to read. Now you need to be able to have a better grasp of understanding what it is you're reading in order to internally ascertain the truth behind it. And it's a skill that I think, ironically, we just do not have anywhere close to enough in supply. We're just not proficient enough as a species around the world. Because despite the age of information, so much is at our fingertips. I am somewhat fortunate to kind of grow up in between both eras, the pre-internet and post-internet era. And yes, when I was a teenager and older, the internet did exist, but it didn't really exist like what it is now, where information is at your fingertips. And even with information at our fingertips, the public of our democracies around the world are no better informed whatsoever. And it's telling, I would argue, that even a politician as universally admired as Barack Obama has as many critics as he has as much disagreement as he has, and was unwilling in many ways to figure out a path out of some of the bad politics that was happening in his country, both as president and post his presidency. It took individuals who weren't beholden to corporate overlords to kind of make a stand and slug it out in a very imperfect way that did not guarantee any results. And at a point in time, there was lamentations that comedy was dead. Comedy, an art form that goes hand in hand with free speech, a concept that goes hand in hand with liberalism and ideology that supposedly goes hand in hand with left-wing social progressive politics, because free speech allows the voiceless to be guaranteed a voice. And ironically, all of that has been turned over its head in North America, and I don't want to get further down the rabbit hole. But my point is, it's not as though we could take things for granted that they remain static and simple. They're becoming dynamic and complex. And at times, we take it for granted that the people who we are listening to are speaking in good faith, when the fact of the matter is, too many, whether they be politicians, activists, civic leaders, are either grifters or they're lemmings following a Pied Piper unknowingly off of a cliff, not just out of town. And now, in our own country, we have to deal with, well, perhaps we should sideline God as a Trinity, because it seems as though we're not unique in having issues with trust in our leaders, whether it be journalists, media, politicians, entertainers and celebrities, etc. But at the end of the day, just because our issues aren't unique doesn't mean that we don't have to face them ourselves. We can't just wait and hope that someone else saves us. And we have our own questions now. We've reached a point where who do we believe and who do we trust? Locally, not just on the internet, not just on those big foreign issues that we like to import, locally. That is the implied question coming from our very own Prime Minister. And unfortunately, I do wonder if he does not realize the irony of the situation. It is almost as though too often people in power, and this is not just a PNM thing, this is a Trinbagonian thing, and to some extent it probably happens outside our borders, but I'm just speaking about us right now. People in power, for whatever reason, don't understand how it is that even when they ask for trust, the consequences of their actions makes it very difficult for us, the common citizens, to follow them. It's almost as if leadership is a foreign concept, and the ability to generate trust is assumed to be unnecessary. It is almost as if they feel entitled to our trust just because they are who they say they are. And at the end of the day, that generally goes down the line of a different form of government that also begins with D. That's one of the ways that it starts. Are we there? I don't think we're close to that. But the road to hell isn't just paved in good intentions. We get to that destination 1 foot at a time. Now, why do I bring all of this up? Well, there's a lot to unpack. We might not get through it all, but let's start off today's daily review. Ironically, with all that I just said, the first thing I want to bring up is something that I think is reasonable, some concepts brought to the table that I appreciate from the Prime Minister and his press conference when he returned from his trip. Well, he said it's not a vacation. Maybe it was, maybe it isn't. Do I think that there was value in his trip? I think there was value enough. One of the few things that it seems that the Prime Minister can do well, among other things or other members of his government, is perhaps be a diplomat and a salesman for the country. We have an issue with regards to what he's trying to sell, but at least he does get results for the things that he prioritizes and his other government ministers prioritize. At least so far that we know of, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed. So, two things. Foreign investment. The Prime Minister is looking at the countries that he visited. One is India, and this whole Premier League cricket thing from India and government land to make an academy or what have you, to make supporting facilities for cricket. Listen, I don't have an issue with it. At the end of the day, the IPL is one of the biggest sports leagues in the world. And with regards to sports, now granted, you could argue that soccer, an English word, because rugby was originally called rugby football. So if you want to know why American football is called American football, blame the Brits. It used to be rugby football, hence the origin. And soccer used to be association football, shortened to soccer by the Brits. But anyway, that and track and field are probably two areas besides cricket where our sports could flourish and we could see success, hopefully, maybe. But those things require a lot of support, and I don't know if we're going to get enough support in those things. Our track and field athletes, they tend to just go abroad and train individually, and it works out for them, and we see international success from them over the last 10 years. It's amazing what they have been able to accomplish. Football, not so much. But the IPL, and then to some extension, the CPL and all the other cricket initiatives, there's room for growth there. There's room for commercialization there, right? We could see it happen. And ties to the IPL might make a lot of sense. And it could help with regards to bringing up a whole new industry in a bigger way. Yes, we have cricket already. But part of it is now it gives young men and young women who have athletic, dispositions as opposed to academic ones, something to strive for, as well as a platform to hopefully show young people good examples of good role models, besides the random track and field athlete who just happens to get a gold medal randomly because they were able to do it on their own effort. This allows us to maybe generate systemically role models from a sporting industry that could offer not just jobs to cricketers, but also all the supporting jobs that were required if the industry could grow. And then now on to Ghana. If I am correct, it's a economic collaboration with regards to the Guyana Natural Gas Company. So, and with regards to Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited. So I am assuming they haven't gone through it in detail, that it could be another supplier of liquid natural gas, because that's how it has to be transported here, for our upstream or downstream industries, for our processing industries, for our industrial parks, which to some extent in the long run that's necessary, because 11 years, if that estimate is correct, is not a lot of time. So I have no problem with this part of the Prime Minister's trip. In fact, that's the primary part of his trip. That's why I started off with that. And I hope to see successes. I know that there's criticisms, particularly for the Indian private investment connection. But you know what? At the end of the day, I just want to see some positive things happen. Yes, I get it. We have a whole cricket academy that was constructed there in central Trinidad. Yeah. Look, I don't know what the details are, but if foreign direct investment comes in to help an aspect of sport locally, I'm all for it. Now, let's move on. Now we get into the bad, because the Prime Minister was attempting damage control. And to some extent, I will give him these props. He was much better with regards to how he came across over the Auditor General's situation, or the disagreement between her and the Minister of Finance. He was much better than his fellow cabinet members. And to some extent, it's almost as though, he is Prime Minister for a reason instead of the other guy. Now, he was doing damage control. So on one hand, with regards to the audit gate, he basically said, well, look, this is a serious accusation, which I appreciated, because it's true, it is a serious accusation, and he outlined a way where this could have consequences for us, even if it was resolved simply. He pointed to not necessarily a apples-to-apples comparison situation, but a similar error where Energy had the wrong figure, the Minister of Finance caught the mistake, they corrected the mistake, and a rating agency still, frowned upon the situation, saying, well, hold on, we can't have 100% trust in this. Now, the thing is, he's saying we should wait on the investigation, but part of the problem with the situation, which I tried to explain, I think it was Thursday or Friday, was that the situation, apparently, how it was handled from the get-go was questionable. But more importantly, how it was presented to the public initially, I would say, was done in a bad way. And the Prime Minister, to some extent, he did a decent job in not appearing to be as, well, not making the mistakes of his ministers, Finance and Attorney General. But I think he was also trying to not necessarily take a stand per se, except given the fact that the probe in and of itself is before the courts, and to some degree he did say, well, this is before the courts. So it seems as though he didn't necessarily want to speak at length about it, but that is one of the things before the courts. So to say then that he wants to see the probe go through without potentially giving us any further explanation as to what form should he think it should go through, if he believes that in its current iteration it's fine and above board. He didn't go into all of that, but he did imply or give his, to some extent an approval of the current probe by not necessarily, criticizing it or speaking down upon it. And I feel as though, at least for those who have my position, that's a little bit disappointing, but what is more disappointing is the implications of him saying that the bacchanal was unnecessary. And I don't think he pointed a finger directly at the media, But to some extent, it was almost as though he did not understand why this situation blew up as it did. And then now, of course, so believe it or not, whenever anything like this happens, I don't just automatically say, well, that's because he's dumb. I don't say that. The first thing that I say is, okay, he does not agree. Now, granted, I've gone through this process before with the other 2 cabinet members involved. So bear with me. It's not like I didn't, right? To some extent, mentally, Prime Minister doesn't agree. What's his basis for saying that? Based on what we know, based on what they tell us, based on how they framed it. They framed it. We ain't even reached any Auditor General yet. And I'm kind of left wanting because at the end of the day, the Minister of Finance started this whole thing off bad by essentially going against what would have been proper procedure in a manner very similar to what the Prime Minister did with regards to the merit list. And remember, as far as I am aware, he knew that the Prime Minister knew well enough to try to deny his involvement until he eventually had to admit it, I believe. So the thing about it is, they're within a kind of a legal no man's land because what the Minister of Finance did, similar to the withdrawal of the merit list, I don't think there's anyone who could actually enforce the spirit, the implied spirit of the law, or in this case, it might actually be the literal interpretation of the law. You get the report, the Auditor General's report, your next sitting in Parliament, you present it. That was not done. That was not done. He got the Auditor General report. He did not present it. He tried to stall it. And now he's saying, well, the next sitting, he's going to present it. So the Prime Minister is saying, well, what's all the bacchanal for? That's a big deal if a minister, a sitting minister, does not follow through the procedure outlined by the law. And that's technically how this whole thing was presented. The beginning of the presentation and framework from the government side started with that. That's not a good leg to stand up on. So then when the Prime Minister says, well, you should believe the government, why? Based on your own ways. We haven't even gotten to the Auditor General on her claims yet. You've already started off by a literal reading of the law. You have already started off on shaky ground. And then on top of that, the defense of the situation and the defense against the claims to the Auditor General in the public was at best head-scratching, to say the least. Now granted, as I said, so don't get it twisted. It's a he said, she said to some extent, but it's difficult to believe that the Auditor General is lying because to some extent, those lies, if the Auditor General is lying, would be in public record on the report that she once laid in Parliament. She wants it laid in Parliament because she gave it to the minister to lay in Parliament. She put her disclaimer in, I believe it's an amendment to the report that she wants laid in Parliament, or part of the report. So if she is acting in bad faith, she's putting it on the record to be scrutinized by one and all. It's kind of hard to see how an auditor would do that. She is not even 6 months into the job, I believe. Or maybe she is about 6 to 7 months into the job. She's definitely not a year into the job. That's a very interesting way to keep your term in office short. I don't know if she's looking to break that record. No one reasonably is. So again, it's kind of hard then to just dismiss her claims, because to believe the government's claims to some extent, you have to dismiss hers. Hence why I find this situation is interesting, because when you have competing claims to this extent, that implies somebody is lying. I'm not willing to now say who. Notice I never said who is lying in all of my commentary. The issues I have is how the members of the government choose to defend themselves. And then on top of that, the Prime Minister also sought to try to do some damage control over the situation of the Commissioner of Police. And on the surface, I understand. It is reasonable where, in a vacuum, they've reached a point where the Police Service Commission is not ready with a new candidate to succeed Airlink Christopher to replace her. So they extend her for a year. Now, granted, that doesn't necessarily mean that she can't be replaced midway through, right? I believe. Like, they don't have to just extend her for a year and she has to sit through the year. I could be wrong, maybe. I mean, it all depends on how they set it up. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But the problem is, are we just going to accept the Prime Minister say, well, the Police Service Commission was late? You know, they started the process late, so we had no choice. Like, that to me seems like a limp excuse. A limp excuse. And, I mean, look, we have another situation that I don't want to get into, where the DPP basically just had to say, well, look, the Attorney General didn't really provide any context for things that he said about me. The things that he said about not taking on foreign lawyers, right? I just want to get... He said it was interesting that apparently the no thank you wasn't contextualized by the AG according to the message that he was given by the media, right? And it's things like this. It seems as though a lot of the time the government gets in trouble with its communication by trying to limit what they say because they don't want to say the wrong thing, but then they end up saying the wrong thing because there are times when transparency and context matters. In part, what a lot of the criticisms from the government is that we don't understand the context of the situation. Well, you don't give it us. So again, how are we supposed to give you the benefit of the doubt? Ultimately speaking, Mr. Prime Minister, this is an issue of your own making and the making to potentially a greater extent by your ministers. Not necessarily to single out the ones in the public eye in the last week and a half, but rather the lack of communication. It's an even greater issue with some of the other ministers who we barely hear anything about. It's almost like if they have nothing to say. They are ministers in name only. We don't even know if their ministries are even functioning because we have no idea what's going on there. But that's just part of the issue. You have created this situation, and part of judging an individual and their term in office and their track record literally is all the historical examples that may or may not be pertinent. When a paper is written, an academic paper, a report, a government paper, a journalistic paper for a news article or an opinion column, anything with any sort of integrity would at least examine and discuss various situations that may or may not be appropriate, that may or may not be similar or have some bearing on the matter at hand, and then within the discussion, we determine, or we at least try to determine, if it should or should not be concluded. So I have included things like the merit list as the lead up due to the similarities of how the situations were handled. Ultimately speaking, I do agree to some extent with Mr. San Fernando Acola in that the actual genesis, the main issue at the core of it, is somewhat forgotten. But where we disagree is, it's forgotten in no small part to the fact that how the government decided to handle this situation, even if I was to take their claims at face value, was wrong because of what the minister did in that sitting of Parliament on the 26th of April. It started wrong from there, and then the Attorney General did not help. All right. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll wrap up some more topics on the Daily Review quickly, and then we will welcome a new media ambassador. ASP Ali couldn't join us this morning, but the TTPS media ambassador sent us someone else to continue the conversation, so stay tuned for that. We'll be right back after this. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Coming soon to WESN.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren. Coming soon to WESN.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Welcome back to Talking Point. Now, one of the last things coming out of the Prime Minister's press conference, and this was actually bigger than the audit gate situation, and that is the SSA gate situation, which, believe it or not, generally speaking, I don't have an issue with how the government handled this, right? I do think that there was an opportunity cost of bringing in our ambassador from Washington during such critical times because Maduro can't settle himself down, but at the end of the day, one could argue the SSA problem was a bigger issue that was more important. And you could say, some people might want to criticize government saying, well, how could you have been taken by surprise? Well, the unfortunate situation is it's difficult to watch the watchers, and then who watches the watchers and watches the watchers, and we could keep going down the line, right? Now, to some extent, this and other situations that I'm going to bring up just now does bring into question if there are deficiencies within how the government is handling national security beyond just not having a crime plan. But I will say this for the most part. Generally speaking, being blindsided by controversies happening in an institution like the SSA, we are not unique in these sorts of happenings, right? To some extent, what they do can't be made public, which makes political oversight, or rather oversight, because political oversight could imply different things. If you're from a Soviet state, that has a whole different meaning. But oversight by duly elected representatives, it's tricky because you can't always just reveal everything to Parliament, even if it's behind closed doors, there's no recordings, etc., etc. It's not made open to the public. 41 parliamentarians and clerks and blah, 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 blah. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? And of course, you have competing political agendas, which technically speaking, you still should have opposition as part of the oversight mechanism. Therefore, we could have better faith in the oversight mechanism because we can't know what they're overseeing unless there's a problem like what we have now. But with that said, how the government has handled the situation, at least initially, I don't have a problem with. There was a big problem with a significant arm of national security that has to continue to function. So you can't just leave it alone while you build your case secretly because the allegations are too high, and on top of that, their issues could be contributing to the crime problem. Now, hindsight might say, maybe it would have been better to leave them alone. Maybe it would have been better to conduct an investigation into them secretly without their knowing, to build a case for better prosecution. That's a judgment call because people are dying on the streets as we speak, And if the SSA was compromised due to whatever was going on, allegations, nothing necessarily proven in a court of law yet, you have competing or dual responsibilities. Building the case against any wrongdoing within the SSA versus ensuring that its functions are being carried out properly in order to safeguard public well-being, security, life, etc. However, I do wonder if there are wider implications with some of these things, right? One, the deficiencies of our criminal justice system, our investigative procedures, and potentially the laws which lay the foundations for these things. And I think that last part there, I do wonder to some extent if we're seeing weaknesses in all of these things, because as the years go by and we progress and the situation becomes more complex, if our laws aren't updated, they just can't handle these situations. Hey, that's why we have this meritless situation. It's potentially a gray area that's not addressed directly. Can the list be withdrawn? It's just not included. What are the penalties for not withdrawing it? Hey, the whole Auditor General situation. What if the minister doesn't actually put the report in Parliament? What's the penalties there? I don't believe there are any penalties on the books. In fact, here's an interesting thing about the probe, just going back to that, and deficiencies with our laws. I don't know if there's any way legally the Minister of Finance can compel the Auditor General to participate in what he termed to Parliament, described to Parliament as an internal probe. And these are just potential deficiencies and gaps in our laws to carry out what should be straightforward things. What about criminal investigation? Then, on top of that, there's wider implications, I think, that perhaps this SSA situation has led us to. Because apparently there's supposed to be an audit of regiments' firearms by special branch. And in fact, it was approved of by head of the Defense Force, the Air Vice Marshal. The special branch officers apparently were denied access by the guards at the gate of the Kumuto base. Regardless, there are concerns, let's get the lower third back up here now. There are concerns with regards to Defense Force ammunition and potential firearms. The SSA it's not SSA firearms, it's maybe police firearms or Defense Force firearms that were in the custody of the pastor and the former head of the SSA. He was now fired, Major Best. I do wonder if this whole firearm situation, part of the complaint is we're going after private users, that's the low-hanging fruit. Not only are we potentially dissatisfied, I would say, it's not unreasonable to say a lot of the population would be dissatisfied with how the illegal firearms are being handled, but now are we trying to play catch-up with any loopholes or gaps with regards to monitoring and overseeing state firearms, because that's essentially what the SSA is asking. Not to say that regiment firearms were involved with the SSA, but it's interesting that a decision was made to double-check all of that if possible. And perhaps one of the reasons why the government is taking the low-hanging fruit is their fear is that there are so many gaps, or at least unknowns, that they don't have a handle on. They're trying to quickly close as many windows as possible. Unfortunately, to some extent, most of us have already realized the horse has already bolted out of the door, so they can close all the windows they want. But that gaping wide barn door, with the horse already gone, it's an obvious problem that we have no solution, because all we could do is close doors. We have no plan to bring the horse back into the stable. And the horse being the propensity of illegal firearms, automatic weapons. Ironically, you can't get that with regards, in theory, from the private firearm users. They don't have access to that, or at least they shouldn't. But you know who does have access to that? And to some extent goes back to the SSA's question. Well, the Defense Force does, the state does. So while the state is saying, oh, apparently according to the ATF, 30 private firearms were used in crimes, we don't actually see these firearms being confiscated. What about state firearms? We already know that a member of the regiment was involved in the violent ambush outside of Grand Bazaar with the money truck for Pennywise. Automatic weapons fire into the cab, killing the security guards instantly. I mean, extrajudicial killings, prison service, allegations, suspicions, etc., notwithstanding, it's not as though the National Security Ministry and its various arms are squeaky clean and above board. So what else is missing? What other gaps are there? And to some extent now, that falls on the responsibility of the overseers and not necessarily on all of the people on the ground in these services. If they were all corrupt, then this country would have fallen apart long ago. It's the few, and the few has to be managed, weeded out by the people in charge, but apparently we're limp in that aspect as well. All right, I'll close things off here. Of course, crime in Tobago, that was another thing the Prime Minister was asked about. And the Chief Secretary, he brought up a THA police force. Now, it's not that it's set in stone and it's going to happen. I think basically what he said was they've gone through the process of looking into it, seeing how it might be done. They can implement it, but I assume this will be in part of Tobago autonomy, or at least one of the proposals, or at least something that perhaps some Tobagonians might want to see. It begs the question if we should overhaul our overall police system, not the TDPS specifically, but the overall police system, the duties, responsibilities, training of things like the municipal police, and to what extent will that have an effect on our policing? We're a small country, so we don't necessarily need multiple systems of policing, but then now, for Tobago to have its own police, there are complications with regards to that I don't want to get into because some of it will be highly speculative and maybe inflammatory. But the appropriateness of that is something that can be debated. The flip side, of course, is practical considerations for the THA to have an active hand in trying to safeguard the people living in Tobago. That also is something that we can't just ignore. I think this is an interesting topic that we shouldn't just dismiss out of hand, but we shouldn't just automatically approve of either. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we will switch gears slightly and we'll welcome our new media ambassador for the day. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started
to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there, next in staff. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot have a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
Welcome back to Talk About Sean Michael Smallhead, joined by a new media ambassador. This is not the first time ASP Ali couldn't be with us, but we have someone new to take his place, at least for today, and he is Acting Inspector Kurt Callender. Soon to be, hopefully, Inspector Kurt Callender. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you so very much. Morning to you, morning to Trinidad and Tobago, and morning to wherever they are tuning or listening in the world today.
And yes, folks, I am very much aware that the inspector is dressed way better than I am. But at the end of the day, he's dressing to impress, and I'm just the smart aleck on TV ranting and raving. But pushing aside now perhaps all the opinion and the politics, there's some practical considerations with regards to situational awareness. And there's two examples in particular, I think, or three, that at least I want to ensure that we touch on. One, of course, is the old bugbear of Facebook Marketplace. Yes. And you know, you're gonna buy something and you put yourself in a bad situation and your money gets stolen or your goods get stolen, and then what is there left to do? Or even worse, in the most recent case, you electronically send your money to persons unknown. I don't even know if there's a way to easily get that back, because once they kind of swap it out of that account, depending, it might be difficult to track.
Yes. Well, as you would have quite rightly mentioned, and it's one of your bugbears.
Yes.
A lot of pet peeves for us as well. In the TTPS, we continue to mention these things over and over and over again. And we are still seeing persons becoming easily susceptible, and they are parting with their hard-earned cash very easily. So I want to start off by talking about a theory called the RAT theory, the routine activity theory. That is one of the criminological theories. And that theory speaks to three things. It speaks to the motivated offender, which is the criminal element. It speaks to a suitable target, which is the victim or the intended victim. And the third thing it speaks about is the lack of a capable guardian. And the lack of a capable guardian, depending on the situation that one may find themselves in, could be many things. Lack of some safety device in your vehicle, things in your homes that could assist you in keeping you safe and so on. Now, the only thing that you may have control over, because that is a triangle, the tree. So if you remove one of that triangle, well, it pretty much makes you less of a target or no target at all. And the best way, the easiest one to remove from that triangle is yourself.
Being a potential victim.
Yes, because that is what you have control over.
Right.
How do you remove yourself from that triangle? That is where situational awareness comes in. So what exactly is situational awareness? Well, simply put, is really being aware of your surroundings and any potential hazards or threats. So a person who practices situational awareness recognizes the possibility of either being attacked, harmed, or put in a dangerous situation and is prepared to act to protect themselves. Right? So people who work on improving their situational awareness have heightened observations, become more aware, and are better strategic thinkers and able to better take advantage of opportunities. So when it comes to situational awareness, it speaks to four main characteristics: observation, orientation, decision, and action. Observation involves constantly monitoring the people and actions taking place around you.
Yeah, that's the obvious.
So is someone around you exhibiting violent behavior? That is one of the questions you have to ask yourself.
But what about depending on the time of day? Oh, I don't know this person. Why are they here in my, one-way dead-end street?
Exactly.
Just passing through to nowhere?
Exactly, and the person may not be known to you. What do you do? Orientation.
Right.
So the orientation encourages you to think about what is around you and how you are processing information based on your own experience. If found in trouble, where would you ask for help?
Would that also include, if there's an issue where you might try to escape to? Because I think sometimes people, they're worried about a situation, but they don't think, well, if something happens,
what do they do?
Don't continue down the dead-end street.
That's right. So you're coming right into number 3 now, which is decision.
Right.
And then action. So the decision has you weigh all your options and look for what is the best possible outcome within your own capabilities. And when they say within your own capabilities, if 3 persons are approaching you in your mind, you might be Blackie China now. But in reality, you do not have the skill sets to take on 3 men.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
So do not go thinking that you are a superhero.
Is this a problem because of Hollywood, that people really don't understand what fighting entails? I mean, even boxing is just a form of fighting that's a sport. Fighting criminals, that's a different
thing. Now, the thing is, there may not be a fight, because it's 3-on-1.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So you have to assess, we speak about that, you assess now this situation. Is it worth it for me to risk my life taking on 3 assailants who may be armed? You understand? Then you have to action. Is the last step, and has you use all the previous information you would have gathered to protect yourself and to get to safety. So you would have made your observations, you had your orientation, you have a decision to make. What action am I going to take based on all what I would have observed?
Now, the thing with Facebook Marketplace, that seems somewhat an easy decision.
Yes.
At least to us, right? You know, this is obvious. I have, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars. I should be careful with it. But like, let's say you are coming home during the day or you're coming home late at night. Those are 2 periods, ironically, as opposite as they might seem, where activity is very low and it's easy potentially for people to sneak around, do something, you know, less than legal. Is it, I do feel that there's always the temptation for taking for granted. Well, I mean, oh gosh, you know, why am I paranoid? I'm just going home, you know, I just go into the house quick, you know, I mean, oh look, if I'm spooked now, what am I gonna do? Go somewhere and wait for 15 minutes, an hour for no reason, waste gas, waste time, you know, I'm tired, I wanna go home, or I'm busy, I have stuff to do, and we kind of take it for granted where maybe if we just took 15 minutes extra double back,
yeah,
that might be better. Yeah, make the block.
Yeah, make the block. Call the police, and you cannot be living in isolation in a community in 2024. There have to be a number of emergency numbers that one can call or even send a message. We are speaking about forming neighborhood watch groups, and within most communities now they have some village councils that are vibrant, as well as some community groups that seeks the interest of persons within their community. So you can send out your fielders, send out information. You may not be able to make a call, but send out a WhatsApp message, a voice note to those groups to let them know, look, because it could raise a red flag. Look, there is something suspicious taking place at my house or close to my house, outside of my house, on the street where I'm living in. So persons now can quickly come to your aid, render some level of assistance. You may have a police officer or some law enforcement officer living on your street. Get acquainted with those individuals so that the criminal element, now in other words, there is safety in numbers.
Yes.
There is safety in numbers. So you don't have to be body, ring on finger. The persons on your street don't have to be your RRB or your RRG, your real boy or your real girl. But from a safety perspective, you cannot live in isolation.
But even if, say, you just do have faith in your neighbors, then, you know, should you just consider, look, I just need to remove myself for however long it takes.
Well, that will be because that is what you have control over.
Right.
So and
go back to the first point.
Right. So we're going back to the first one. Your actions is what you have control over, and your actions could very well include that you pass your house street as though you don't know anybody there at all.
Now, I find myself in a catch-22 because while I don't like the idea of racial stereotyping or profiling or what have you, it could be economic profile, what have you, right? You see 3 strange people on the street during a time of day, you don't know them, you know, you're not sure what they're about. On one hand, it could be a red flag. On the other hand, it could just be 3 guys innocently, you know, they're here to do a job, cut somebody's grass.
True.
Right? Like, now, I guess I'm left in an uncomfortable situation because I don't want to cry wolf when there's nothing, right? And cast suspicion on people who might be innocent. But at the same time, in the current environment, should I err on the side of caution and hope for the best or seek out my own interests, you know?
Well, my response to that, it is always better to be safe than sorry.
Right.
So whilst you don't want to cry wolf, you also don't want to leave anything to chance. So generally, the area where I live in, we see some persons looking suspicious. They put it on the community chat, and somebody may respond and say, well, no, those 3 guys came in with the corporation to do a job, to clean the drains, to cut the parks, as the case may be. And the other response would be, well, nobody told us that.
Right.
And that is, why weren't we told about this? You understand? But at least you're getting some response, you are getting some feedback. So your heightened situation now would go from here to here, because you have some level of comfort now. Well, okay, those 3 guys are not suspicious characters anymore.
On the flip side, for those who might find themselves in a situation being questioned, whether by people of the neighborhood or the police, I guess it's safe to say your advice to them would be to look, understand, if they don't know you, these are the times wherein just cooperate and it should all, you know, be over and, you know, and blow over and work itself out, right?
Yeah. But I wouldn't, once you, because as we go deeper in, they will tell you, look, you know yourself.
Right.
Once you see or feel something that is not right, trust your instincts. And sometimes your instincts may turn out to be correct. It may not, because there is a thin line, or there's a line, rather, I should say, between safety and paranoia, and I think you mentioned that.
Yes, but, well, I don't know if I mentioned that. Maybe I did. But there is a flip side to that, because, of course, now private firearm licenses is a hot topic on 2 fronts, right? We won't necessarily go into that, but I will say that situational awareness and what actions you take with a firearm, that has a lot of risks, not just to you, because unfortunately, I'm not putting judgment on the officer who drew his gun and fired at the robbery. I'm just pointing out to the outcome. He decided to take a stand. It didn't necessarily end well for him. My fears are for the civilians who have less training than him.
Yes.
Right? That's really what it is about, right? To just so that, look, these are the very real risks. But then there's the flip side to that. The risk isn't not just you get yourself here trying to engage in a gunfight. What if you kill someone who was not guilty because you took it too far? So it's one thing to be paranoid when you are unarmed and you're just, okay, I'll avoid a situation. But paranoia when you are armed, potentially, and the outcome, the results.
Yeah, it can have some dire consequences. So there's a marksmanship principle that speaks to backdrop selection.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So backdrop selection speaks about you must not only be aware of your target, but what is beyond your target. So if you have to assess the situation 10 times more than the untrained person because you have a licensed firearm. Before you even resort to firing that weapon, because it could have dire consequences. So you have to be absolutely certain that that is the only resort that you have, and no other resort or action was possible at that particular point in time. Because once you are in a situation where you have armed perpetrators and they are firing at you, they are not firing at you to inquire about your well-being. Right? They want to either rob you or take something of value from you, including your life. You have to assess that situation even before you fire back.
Right.
Because you could end up saying, well, you firing at me, let me fire back. But that may not be the best decision at that particular time, because behind them, if you miss, might be an innocent bystander. So for
you would still be liable to some extent.
You would,
that,
yes.
Right?
You may still be liable, yes. I mean, pending the outcome of an investigation and so on. So it's not just a case, well, I have a licensed firearm, I am defending myself. You have to weigh all your necessary options. Was it the best thing to do at that particular time? I mean, in a mall, for example.
Yeah, it's subjective, but that's the point. It could go either way depending on a whole host of details and context. Okay, we have to take a break. When we come back, the inspector will still remain with us. We'll continue the conversation and we'll open up the phone lines. He will be here to be put on the hot seat. Please remember to be respectful and understand his position. We'll be right back after this.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the home store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh. I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People. The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Sean Michael Small with Inspector Kurt Callender. That's like a Hollywood name almost, right? You know, that sounds like, you know, it should be like, you know, Trinbago Vice, you know. But anyway, there's a bit more to this topic to get out, some basic things for the public to be aware of.
Right. So the more prepared and aware the persons are of possible hazards and dangerous scenarios, the less likely they are to be accidentally hurt or even become victims of crime. And you could start improving your everyday safety by incorporating some of these tips. So I want to start with at home. At home, switch up your routine at home.
Yes.
Don't pass the same.
This is similar with when they were taking people from the banks, they were intercepting them when they got withdrawals. Don't have the same routine.
That's right. So you need to keep people guessing where you are and what you're doing. So if you think you are being followed, don't drive to your home, as you were mentioning earlier. Drive to a police station. Or if you are not able to do so, drive to a public place like a shopping center or a restaurant where you can actually, of course, most housing development do have those things. But, you know, drive somewhere. Before you enter your home, look for anything out of place or anything damaged around the perimeter. Because now the thing is, most homes are what you call blind spots. Eh? So if you are standing in the front, you can't see to the back. If you're standing to the back, you can't see to the front. Right, so it's to eliminate as much of those blind spots as much as possible.
And I will add, if you're in a dead-end road, be careful when you drive into your road. If you have any kind of fears, stop and wait and look before you commit going down that road.
That's right.
Okay, we do have a caller on the line, so we'll take the caller and we'll continue the conversations. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Diego Martin.
Good morning, Mr. Small and the TTPS officer. I want to make a comment on what the TTPS has been advising us on. And they're telling us to be wary of our surrounding. But the criminal, in terms of way of what the TTPS is telling. For example, the TTPS tell us, put in...
Caller, you're breaking up. Caller? I don't know if the people at home heard him, but we couldn't really hear him after his first initial sentences. I might have to ask the caller to call back so that we can understand him. I don't want to assume exactly what the point is being made, because then, you know, we might get it wrong and go down the wrong path.
Yes.
But I mean, if you just want to continue while we have the time.
Yes. So leave your entrance and backyard lights on.
Right.
And always close your...
to save electricity.
Right. Now, there is a very simple, cost-effective way in which you can have duster-down lights at the exterior of your house. There is something that you can purchase in any electrical store for less than $100. You screw it into the same place you screw the bulb, and you screw your bulb into that, and you are leaving on your light switch 24 hours of the day. That automatically turns that ordinary cheap bulb into a duster-down light. I have about 6 of them around my house, so my light switch does be on 24/7. So when it's night, it comes on. When it's day, dawn. When it's dark, it comes off. So for persons who are leaving home very early in the morning and is coming home late in the evening, you pretty much have your exterior, your entire exterior could be well lit at very minimal cost to you. You don't have to break the bank, and it is not going to cost you an arm and a leg at all. So if
people kind of underestimate, this could make the difference.
A huge difference.
This could scare the criminals away or give your neighbors an opportunity to see what's going on so they could move quicker, maybe have a more definitive report, maybe help you in the aftermath, depending.
But more importantly, they may not know when you are home and when you're not at home.
Ah, that's a good point. They may not know. We have Elsa Coroni line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Yes, morning, Sean. Morning, Inspector Calendar.
Morning.
I like the, your advice about taking precautions and all of that and be aware of your surroundings. I just want to point out about, and in terms of reaction, in terms of carjacking, Inspector. Now, I'm reading an article here on the Sunday Express, just this Sunday, about a young man, only 33 years old, Adil M., carjacked down in Princess Town side. Apparently working PH after his working hours with the Princess Town Regional Corporation. The report says, Inspector, that his body was found with a wound to the back of his head, plying Perry Young Road, Fairfield in Princess Town. Now this, I don't know the background of course, the incident, but I'm just thinking, Inspector, here we have a man plying his trade after working hours with I suppose a PH car, and he picks up passengers or passenger. Now, I know people with PH working PH probably pick up passengers who they know, but in this case, as I mentioned to you, I don't know the real circumstances. How does a PH taxi, in the face of this crime spree that is circulating in this country, how does he defend himself? How does he know who's a carjacker? Over to you, Inspector. Thank you.
And you see, that will be the challenge there for, because PH taxi drivers usually function and operate late at night.
Right, that's the main difference. They are at more risk because of that.
They are at more risk than the average taxi driver because they only come out late at night because the taxi drivers don't work that late. And you can have just about anybody jumping into your vehicle as a potential passenger.
Usually, I would argue, it's the passengers that are the ones at risk. It was a blind spot to me that the PH drivers also.
Right. And the reason for that is because the criminal elements are seeing now, they are now a soft target. Because they are operating in the dead of night or early in the morning with very limited security around because the place is dark, and they go into places that the taxi drivers would not venture.
Remote places.
Remote places. And dangerous places that the average taxi drivers may not venture or want to venture. But they are saying, look, this is an opportunity for me to make an extra income, and I am going where persons don't want to go. They may pay me a little extra. Them a little extra and so on. And that is their opportunity to, supplement their income to take care of their family. So that is the element of danger or the risk that they are putting themselves in. And the only thing I could say to that is, look, they have to trust their instincts. So whilst the dollar is good, they have to be able to have that discernment. Trust their instincts to be able to say, look, these guys look shady. But it should be told, what does a criminal look like these days?
Because I think it's the same thing, right? Do you take it for granted and say, well, oh gosh, why sacrifice this little bit,
or rather, it might not be little to you. Like, for me, it might be the 15 minutes to make the block, I might not want to do it, but maybe I should. For the PH driver, it might be, look, this fare might not be worth it, right? But I think to the caller's point, I don't know if they limit themselves to people that they know, because there are times when I don't drive and I walk, and taxis will be hailing me out. Now, I don't travel regularly, but they'll be hailing me out, right? Depending on my bed and outfit, I might pass for...
Yeah,
I know it's not likely, but I could maybe pass for a criminal.
Just to add to that, there's a particular video circulated on social media where a passenger was seen taking something that did not belong to them.
I also wonder how people traveling with packages.
Right, and that is because the driver had a hidden camera. So the PH drivers may have to start getting ahead of the criminal elements by getting some sort of installing some sort of a hidden camera somewhere that have it backed up somewhere to somebody who they trust. So in the event that anything happens to them, God forbid, they have that backed up somewhere as to what exactly transpired. And there are technology, very cost-effective technology that can be used in order for that to happen. Because, I mean, God forbid, let us say they rob you of your vehicle, probably shoot you, burn the vehicle. There's nothing, nobody saw nothing.
Yes.
You understand? But if that camera picks up things that is recording in real time, it may be stored in the cloud somewhere, I don't know, but there are technologies for that. So what I'm saying is that the PH drivers may have to up their game a little bit as it relates to their safety and security, and do not go away with the impression that, well, this cannot happen to me. And that is also for taxi drivers as well, eh?
I mean, I think that's for everybody, right?
Yes.
But I think we were speaking about this off air. We more or less take it for granted that the person that walks past us on the street isn't going to harm us. We just take it for granted. It's one of the things that makes it easy to harm people in society. You assume that the other person will be reasonable and will not have any bad intentions. In general, you know the criminals out there, but you can't literally look at every human being on the road and say, hey, they're all a threat just because they're there. And because of that now, it does kind of make it hard.
Hard, very hard, very hard. And now, once you are a victim of crime, you could get paranoid, you know.
Yeah.
You may not want to go everywhere. And anyway, everybody is a threat to you. And there are some persons I do not know the biological term what they suffer from. They do not go outside.
Right. It could be PTSD if they suffer a thing, but I would imagine there might be a few people who they're so paranoid they didn't need to be the victim of a crime before they don't go outside. And that might be what you're referencing, a medical...
Yes, a medical term, that they are afraid to go outdoors. They literally live in their houses. Everything comes to them, food, everything. They have never stepped outside in years.
We haven't gotten back the caller from Digger Martin, so I would, for the sake of being devil's advocate, I'll go down a path where I suspect he may have been going. And that usually is somewhere on the lines of, well, we're getting this advice. There are different variations of it. One of my callers, he says, well, why does the public have to do the police jobs for them? Yeah. Or there's another variation of, well, when they say don't wear gold chains, but then the officer was wearing a gold chain, I get snatched. Well, I'm not entirely sure what version this caller was going to have, but to some extent now, the whole idea of, well, we have this issue, and if crime was solved, we wouldn't have this issue. And I actually would like to push back on that a little bit. Statistically, the totality of crime could be limited, could be reduced, but crime is just not something you could eliminate.
No, it's not. No, and you are correct. Crime is everybody's business because it affects everybody. So if I have to go down the road of the community-oriented policing philosophy, the history of community policing was one where the community was charged with the responsibility to police themselves.
Right.
There was no formal, structural form of policing. It had no police force, no police service. And when one family member committed a crime, the crime was credited to the entire family. And in order for your record to be expunged, the family had to punish their own family member. If that was not done, the entire family will get the punishment for that one family member.
I mean, I don't know how ethical that is in 2024.
And you are correct. But we come back to that because
we have a caller. One of the callers.
Yes.
That's why I smiled when I heard he was on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good day, Sean.
Morning, morning.
I think I heard you this morning criticizing Tobago for wanting their own police force.
I didn't criticize them. I think it's an interesting question. And I think it's very complicated. There's a lot of implications. Well,
all municipalities have a police force. All.
I know that there are police in Tobago, but I think it's about control and the capacity to some extent control the budget, control the policies, to write laws for. You know, that's why I say there's a lot of implications with what he just said.
Municipal police have a certain function.
Yes.
And they have them in all municipalities. The problem with Tobago is that in most instances they believe that they should not report to the national agency in charge of Trinidad and Tobago. They look at the government of Trinidad and Tobago as the government of Trinidad. But there's no government of Trinidad. In Trinidad you have municipalities like the city of Port-au-Prince and these things. So I don't see nothing wrong, I mean, with the concept of it.
Well, I don't think municipal police was what the Chief Secretary was going for. I think he wanted a police service.
It's a police service in Tobago, but it's the national Trinidad and Tobago police force.
And that's the point. I think he wants a Tobago police. He doesn't want a TTPS unit. He wants a TPS.
So you don't want Trinidad and Tobago police in Tobago?
I mean, there are practical limitations that already makes it a difficult thing to implement. Who's going to train them and do a lot of the overseeing and administration?
The problem is the government, the structure of government. In Trinidad, you have national government.
Yes.
And they run Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Then you have agencies like local government. And they have powers which are subject to the national government. Right?
Well, that's why I asked the question. Maybe the roles of policing and the municipal police, you know, it could be reinterpreted, added, subtracted. I don't know how the change is going to be made, just that it should be looked into.
No, there's a procedure for that. You make a recommendation to the Ministry of National Security.
I mean, it would be interesting if the Chief Secretary made that request or recommendation to see what would happen. But I wouldn't comment more about that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, caller. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. You were touching on things I didn't necessarily want to touch on because I don't want to take a discussion down a certain path. I want to kind of limit it. The Chief Sec was kind of limited here for now. I won't take it down that path because then that kind of puts words in his mouth a little bit. Yes, that audio tape situation, I still am not satisfied with it. I just want to say this up front. But for the most part, he is the Chief Secretary. I try not necessarily to shoot the messenger, you know, to take the message. And his message at this point, we're going to take it in a silo. Does it have some merit? Does it not have some merit? I just said it's an interesting debate. And even if we say no, we shouldn't say no automatically. We should pros and cons, why we're saying no, before we just blanket no, right? So that it could be settled as opposed to just dictated upon. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
City Inspector.
Morning.
On the back of the professor, Mr. Augustine seemed to want to have everything in Tobago that he can control. They want to control the police. They want to control the EMA. Everything that they get opposition with from Trinidad, or they perceive opposition, the licensing authority, they want to control, so they want to have their own thing. 65,000 people. It's so stupid and ridiculous. Now, that being said, the inspector talked about the surroundings. And this is one of the issues that the community seems to be lacking, that is assisting the criminal. And let me tell you why. I live in an area. I've been living here for over 20 years. I have another property in another area where I am there frequently, almost every day. And in the two similarities with those two things are that the people who live around, the neighbors, they do not know one another. They don't speak to one another. And this is I realize this is an element in middle class and upper middle class areas where, and they become targets of crime, but people don't know one another. They don't speak to one another. In the area today, I have a property and I'm there frequently, Sean. Sean, I am the only person, and I'm saying this without fear, that knows most of the people who live in the area and have phone numbers for them. And I had recognized that I am friends with some of them, and I'm speaking to them about another neighbor, and they live in the area, I don't live there, and I have a property there. And they do not know the neighbor's name. They don't know, and I am amazed. I have brought so many of them together by hanging out with them, call this other one, and they come and we stand up in the road and have a chat, and they have started to get to know one another. Another thing people don't do is that I started to cut 2 sets of properties that just grass in the area. The grass, it was high, and I started to cut the grass, and one neighbor asked me, "So what are you cutting the grass for?" I said, "To safeguard the community." So sometimes these are the things that the individuals have to do themselves, because as the inspector said, he talked about the photo cell device to put on your light receptacle. The enemy of thief is light, you know. So you have to make it more difficult for them. So if the grass in particular area is cut low, where the neighbors can see, everybody, there's an easy pathway for everybody. When you look out, you see everything. The criminal now, when he's walking past, or he will realize that wait a minute here, boy, everybody can see me. And these are the things that they have to do. The community has to do, but the community they're not safeguarding themselves. They're not safeguarding themselves. They have a lot to do with allowing crime in the area. You know, you have to make it as the inspector. You have to make yourself a hard target, and that is what they're not doing.
All right, caller, thank you for that. Thank you for that. We have another caller. I'll just say this: one, the police car cut your grass for you, right? And we underestimate things like that, what they mean. But that is a good example, say, of proactive thinking and informal leadership. I will say this: I agree to some extent with your talk about Tobago. I just didn't. There's actually further that I hope we don't get to, at least not prematurely. But to some extent, yes, I can't fault you for your logic with your arguments with regards to the THA wanting to have similar control over things that Trinidad has control over seemingly in government. But we do have another caller on the line from Tobago, so maybe we'll get a different opinion here. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Oh, well, actually, I'm going to point out what you guys just pointed out, Sean. THA wants to have control over, I don't know. Am I coming across, Sean?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Okay, because I'm seeing your mouth going, so I didn't know if I was in sync with you or not.
Yeah, there's always a delay.
What you just said and what the gentleman just said, whether it was a Freudian slip or not, is actually the mindset of many people from Trinidad. THA wants control over the things that Trinidad have control over. Not central government. You didn't say central government. You didn't say the government of Trinidad and Tobago. You said Trinidad have over.
Yeah.
Right? So what you're saying, in essence, is contrary to what the professor said, that Trinidad sees the government of Trinidad and Tobago as the government of Trinidad. That is Trinidad's government. Trinidad's TTPS.
I don't know if
Don't backpedal now. Trinidad, everything is Trinidad, and Trinidad owns it. And now Tobago wants to have control over those things that Trinidad has control over. Your mindset is that the government belongs to Trinidad and Tobago is just an appendage trying to now come in and grab control for itself, to have a Tobago police, a Tobago this and a Tobago that. Why? Because Trinidad has a Trinidad police and a Trinidad EMA. You guys are really, your mindset are showing through in your words when you don't have a time to check yourself. You really see Tobago as an appendage to Trinidad. You do not see it as Trinidad and Tobago. You see it as Trinidad, and then there's Tobago. That is how you really see it. And you must admit that to yourself.
Well,
thank you.
Caller, I understand where you think it's a Freudian slip, but the reality is the framework of the context is, to some extent, it is assumed that it's kind of similar to other forms of discrimination, right? It doesn't just end when one side stops. Both sides, ironically, has to stop because, to some extent, Tobago also views itself, or at least I believe, I'm not saying the whole island, but I do believe the THA administration views itself, based on their statements, as a Trinidad versus Tobago, Tobago versus Trinidad situation. So then now, if you're ascribing the motivations of the THA, we didn't necessarily, I don't know about San Fernando, but I wasn't necessarily looking, and if I did, that was a mistake. With regards to the motivations of the THA, not Tobago, then to some extent, that kind of is the framework that's already existing that has nothing to do with how I view of the situation. Is Tobago an appendage of Trinidad? Well, I wouldn't say it's an appendage of Trinidad, but Tobago is a region of the country, just like how Mayaro is a part of the country. But as a separate island, it has its own unique challenges, which I have acknowledged before. That has to be, to some extent, you know, we still have to recognize so that it's still one country, and it's a unique, complex situation. Even Scotland isn't this complex because Scotland is still part of the landmass, right, to the United Kingdom. So I kind of get it. I understand that you feel it's a Freudian slip, but this is somewhat the framing that we're not viewing it this way, or at least I'm not. This is kind of the framing that has been presented to some extent, that Tobago views itself battling with the central government of Trinidad. And to some extent, there's truth in that, right? On a practical level, to some extent, there's truth in that. On a legal level, of course, that's not the case. On a government level, of course, that's not the case. So we kind of have to push back on that to some extent in order to keep things within the correct framework. But on a practical level, there is some truth to that. The development budget, in some respect, is controlled by the central government. Some items which should not, which are part, apparently, of the TH's fifth schedule, if my memory serves correct. So it's questionable even if they should be in control of various central government agencies. Whereas the EMA, on the other hand, that's, to some extent, I do wonder if the EMA is a bit of a whipping boy for Tobago, because the question is, to what extent does the central government get away with things that the THA does not get away with? Maybe they do. There's a good chance that they do. But I haven't necessarily looked into that. The central government complains about various national institutions in and of itself. Let's not forget that. With regards to the policing, and that's why I started off the way I wanted to start off. Even if I acknowledge San Fernando's points, I do think that the THA thinks it will be easier if they control these things.
Right.
Some of that is practical, right? The problem is with government, practical ease of doing business has to be offset by checks and balances, and that's where it gets complicated. So maybe my mistake was saying, if we're going to say no, we have to have reasons to say no. There's also the chance that we say yes. It's just that the yes is going to be even more complex to figure out. Because there are a lot of implications, and then it goes further than just a police service. So I appreciate your passion. I always like when callers call in to disagree and to call me out on anything. Hopefully I've explained myself. And to some extent, yes, there is a situation where Tobago and Trinidad are seen at odds. Part of it is because of the THA framing it that way. Part of it is because of the actions of the government, and at the end of the day, they're not going to necessarily go all out to support a political rival, and they're going to use their advantage. And now the question is, to what extent is this in bad faith? How much can we prove? How much of it is just accusations, etc., etc.? And the whole situation is kind of complex. and it could give me a headache because there's no easy solution. It's actually more complex to get a solution to this, in my opinion, than it is to get a solution with what's going on between the Auditor General and Minister of Finance. That is a lot more straightforward to me than a lot of these questions with regards to Tobago and the various aspects of autonomy. But that said,
yes,
you're not here to speak about Tobago. You're part of the TTPS, you're here to speak about crime, and you're not based in Tobago, so can't necessarily speak too much on what's going on in Tobago.
Well, for the records, I'm actually a Tobagonian. Eh?
Okay, well, there you go. All right, okay.
Yes, I was born and raised in Tobago. I joined the police service from Tobago in 1997. So I am a Tobagonian 100%. So it is a topic that I am paying keen interest in, but I cannot comment on it.
You cannot comment on it. So I appreciate the fact that
you are correct.
You have a stake, but yes.
Yes. The caller raised some. First of all, I want to commend I think it's the caller before the last caller.
That says back parts, the ones that wasn't criticized, were some good
the
points.
one who spoke about he cutting the grass that doesn't belong to him, because he understands that bush, if it is left uncut, it would be overgrown, and he himself can be a victim of crime.
Yeah.
Right? So things like overgrown bushes, dilapidated and abandoned buildings, derelict vehicles, street light not working, those are safe haven for criminals to operate.
We might take it for granted. They could hide behind a car.
Exactly. But the average person would say, well, it is not my responsibility to cut the grass. It is the dilapidated and abandoned buildings. I don't own that.
Wouldn't that be basically the same thing again? You're like, well, why am I sacrificing this? But when if you're the victim of crime, then you might have regret. Well, maybe if somebody did.
Exactly.
Or maybe if I did.
And it goes back to the routine activity theory again. Making yourself a soft target. Because you may very well be passing by the overgrown bushes every evening. Your child might be passing by the abandoned buildings from school. They're passing by the derelict vehicles and so on. You may have to walk that road that has no street lights functioning. But to you, none of those things are your concern. It's for you to fix, and you're correct enough. But if you leave it there, you are making yourself more susceptible to be a victim of crime. So I want to commend the caller who said that, well, I took the initiative to cut that grass because this is a situation that if left on, if it is not treated with, I could become and he might have saved many victims. So once you make your living environment less susceptible for criminal elements, they are going to go elsewhere.
And just want to say...
So no, just before you go,
sure.
It may not be you. You could call the councillor who could call the regional corporation.
Right, exactly.
So you'd rather go and cut it?
No, well, I mean, you could cut the grass. You can't change the street light.
Exactly.
So
we could call who? 800 bulb.
Right.
You could call the regional corporation and say, look, these derelict vehicles here, look, it's creating a hazard, it's an eyesore, it's an accident waiting to happen.
So here's a question. Might actually be putting on extra work on the service, right? If a member of the public doesn't know who to call, could they call the police service to try to figure out who it is that's going to be responsible?
We liaise with those authorities. Now, the man made another excellent point. The people don't know the people living on the street.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to beat to the cell.
So we do have a neighborhood watch. But in my household, I am the member that does not know his neighbors. So I am guilty of that.
Yeah. So if you don't know who...
and I've lived there all my life.
You must have a relationship with your councillor, whether there is whoever, red, yellow, I don't want to get into the politics.
Of course.
The councillor have their role and function. You have to ensure that they do what they were elected to do. So you know who your councillors are. You communicate to them, this roof is leaking, this street light is not working, these derelict vehicles, those overgrown bushes there. Speak to us, who do we go to? And they would be the conduit now between you and the relevant agencies to get those things treated with.
Well, Inspector Callender, we are way out of time, way over time. So we have to end things there. All I will say is this, look, we just have to do our part, and if we do our part and somebody else fails to live up to the end of the bargain, let that happen. Don't let we also commit the mistake of not holding up our end of the bargain, whether it's the police, local government, whoever, right? All we need is somebody to kind of fall through the cracks, but let them make that error. We still have to do our part regardless to give ourselves a chance. Even if crime was under control, you could still be the victim of crime. There will still always be people with bad intentions. And don't make yourself a target. Thank you, Inspector Callender, for joining me. Thank you for all of our callers for the spirited debate. I know that I actually prefer people like Mr. Tobago who will actually stand for something and have an emotional response because it means something to him than those who are just going to sit back, rock back, and hope that something works out, all the while complaining that the situation is bad. And with that said, make today a good day, as my co-host always says. Remember your allegiance to this republic. We will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Ça fait vivant, je veux pouvoir dire stop et que ça s'arrête rapidement.
Loïc Rézibois is 46 years old. He was diagnosed with Charcot disease in September 2022. His body hasn't been able to hold him up for several months now. This former top-level tennis player can't do anything without the help of his wife, Caroline.
Pour être très concret, la maladie de Charcot, c'est une maladie qui éteint 1 à 1 vos muscles et vous finissez sans pouvoir bouger, mais même pas le petit doigt, sans pouvoir parler, d'ailleurs mon élocution est déjà touchée, et sans pouvoir manger. En gros, vous êtes un légume avec un cerveau. C'est ça la vérité.
An occupational therapist has come to demonstrate a new device which should make his daily life much easier.
Ok, on essaye.
Allez, 1, 2,
c'est très dur à vivre en tant que malade et aussi en tant qu'aidant. C'est une charge mentale énorme, sans parler de la peur de la chute. Moi, j'étais vraiment pas peureux, sincèrement. Aujourd'hui, on peut dire que j'ai presque peur de tout.
Day after day, with Caroline's unwavering support, Loïc pushes his own limits.
C'est la force de Loïc qui nous entraîne en fait. Moi personnellement, je ne me projette pas dans qu'est-ce qui va se passer dans une semaine, dans 2 semaines, dans 1 mois, dans 6 mois, où je serai dans 1 an. Voilà, on vit au jour le jour et on profite.
In the media and on social networks, Loïc is a tireless campaigner for a dignified, assisted death.
Pour être tout à fait sincère, le combat que je mène, ça donne du sens à ce qui m'arrive. Et aujourd'hui, mon objectif, c'est que en France, le plus tôt possible, on arrête de mal mourir. C'est aussi simple que ça.
At Emmanuel Macron's request, MPs will now examine a new bill on end-of-life and assisted dying. To be eligible, the text sets out several criteria. The candidate must be a legal adult, suffering from an incurable disease, in advanced or terminal stage of the illness, capable of expressing their last wishes with lucidity, and suffering from unbearable pain that is resistant to treatment.
C'est une liberté, cette aide à mourir, qui n'empiète en rien sur celle des autres. Si certains ne veulent pas en bénéficier, c'est simple, ils n'ont qu'à pas la demander.
One thing's for sure, Loïc won't be going to Switzerland or Belgium to put an end to his suffering.
Je veux pouvoir mourir en France. Si la loi ne passe pas en temps en heure et que je n'en peux plus, je prendrai mes dispositions.
At the Maison de Gardanne near Aix-en-Provence, the legalization of assisted dying is not considered a positive development. This palliative care facility was co-founded by Dr. Lapiana 30 years ago. Here, they don't call them patients, but residents. Residents who take their meals with the caregivers.
Le repas, c'est vraiment un temps où on n'est plus malade, où on n'est plus soignant, où les visiteurs sont là, les familles sont là. On a tout fait comme si on était à domicile, mais avec la sécurité de l'hôpital.
Oui.
Caregivers don't wear gowns or badges.
Voilà.
Parce que je sais qu'ils n'avaient pas mis trop dessus, ils avaient mis un peu sur le côté, c'est ça?
Ah mais là c'est complètement sur le côté.
If necessary, Marjorie Di Scala can visit a resident 4 or 5 times a day.
Et à l'hôpital, c'est vrai qu'on n'a pas le temps. Mais ça me frustrait énormément. Énormément. Donc là, avoir le temps ici, on a l'impression de faire du travail de qualité, plus.
Families can be there 24 hours a day. This is the case for Mireille. Every evening she moves her bed close to her husband's.
Dès que je suis comme ça, j'ai la main d'Alain qui vient sur moi. Il y a un besoin de contact.
Ah, ça m'a sauvé aussi. C'est un lieu pour des humains. Voilà. On a le temps de la relation, on peut faire beaucoup de choses et que voilà, on n'a pas l'impression d'être venu ici juste pour mourir.
Even if this former theatre director believes that a law should exist for those who are in favour of assisted dying, his stay here has changed his outlook on the issue.
Tu es un peu vive, on va dire. Ça me parlait il y a quelques mois. Maintenant, c'est vrai qu'après une expérience comme celle-là, ça se mesure. Ça se mesure vraiment, quoi.
Les gens qui viennent ici, ils viennent aussi avec des demandes de mourir, avec des demandes d'euthanasie. Et la demande, ils ne l'oublient pas, ils la reportent. À partir du moment où on les soigne bien, donc moi je suis persuadé qu'il faut développer les soins palliatifs en priorité. C'est pour ça que cette loi est une espèce de mélange de tout, et ça me paraît dangereux.
In this establishment, which is accessible to all, regardless of income, they insist that palliative care should not be synonymous with physical and moral suffering. A beauty therapist comes in once a week to offer residents a moment of relaxation.
I don't know.